The self-creating doubt. You have a thought, a decision, a feeling, and then a shadow, a pause, a flicker of hesitation. You question it, just for a second, but that second unravels everything. You begin to doubt, not just the thought, but the fact that you had it. And then you doubt the doubt. You ask, if I'm questioning myself this much, maybe I was never sure to begin with. And suddenly, your uncertainty becomes its own proof. This is the self-creating doubt, a loop where questioning your own mind becomes the very reason you stop trusting it. It feels logical, responsible, intelligent, but it's not clarity. It's erosion, a slow, invisible collapse of your inner compass. You think you're being cautious. What you're actually doing is feeding a fire, because every time you revisit the thought, it becomes harder to separate what was real from what was fear. You start asking, did I really feel that? Was that true? Was I lying to myself? And with each question, the foundation weakens. Not because the truth changed, but because your belief in your ability to know it did. That's the cruelty of self-created doubt. It doesn't need an external challenge. It feeds on your own introspection. You try to find certainty, but certainty keeps moving. You ask, is this the right path? And the moment you feel yes, the voice returns. But what if it's just wishful thinking, and so you delay? Reconsider, rewrite. You tell yourself, I'll decide when I'm sure, not realizing the very act of waiting is fueling the uncertainty, because the longer you doubt, the more doubt seems deserved. It's a loop, a self-confirming cycle where your hesitation feels like wisdom, until it starts feeling like paralysis. This isn't overthinking. This is self-trust corrosion. It shows up in small moments, rereading a text 3 times before sending it, replaying a conversation, dissecting every pause, saying yes, then wondering if you should have said no, then doubting if the wondering itself is a sign of hidden truth. It shows up in big ways too, doubting whether you really love someone or just think you do, wondering if your happiness is real or a mask, questioning whether your success is earned, or if you've tricked everyone, including yourself. The terrifying part? The more emotionally intelligent you are, the more vulnerable you become, because you know thoughts can be deceptive, you know feelings can lie. So you turn the microscope inward. You analyze, you question your motives, you look for the hidden flaw, and in doing so, you lose contact with your own internal signal. You mistake the presence of doubt for the absence of truth. But doubt is not proof of anything, except that your mind is searching. It is not a verdict. It is a question mark. And not every question deserves an answer. The self-creating doubt thrives in silence, in spaces where you wait for absolute certainty. But certainty is not the reward for over-analysis. It's the byproduct of trust, specifically self-trust. The ability to say, I may not be perfectly sure, but I choose to move forward anyway. That's not ignorance, that's courage. Because here's the truth. Every decision contains risk. Every thought carries bias. Every emotion is colored by context. You will never eliminate doubt completely, but you can learn to live above it, to recognize when the doubt is offering new insight and when it's just echoing the fear of being wrong. There's a difference between healthy skepticism and inner sabotage. One helps you think. The other makes you question your right to think at all. Ask yourself, does this doubt feel like a flashlight or a fog? Is it revealing something or just disorienting you? Because when doubt becomes self-generating, it no longer seeks truth. It seeks itself. It loops, feeds, expands, until you're no longer doubting the idea. You're doubting your capacity to know anything at all. And that is the deepest cut. Not uncertainty about the world, but uncertainty about your own mind. So, how do you break it? You interrupt the loop. You stop chasing perfect clarity and start honoring imperfect confidence. You say, I might be wrong, but I'm allowed to act anyway. You stop using your doubt as evidence and start using it as information, a signal to pause, but not to retreat. You let yourself believe what you believed before the fear kicked in. You give yourself permission to choose, even when your inner voice is still debating. Because the truth is, some things only become clear after you commit to them. Some answers only emerge in movement. And if you wait until every part of you agrees, you'll wait forever. Doubt is not weakness, but staying frozen inside it, that is. The The self-creating doubt is a lie that wraps itself in logic. It sounds responsible, it sounds mature, but it's a thief. It steals your time, your action, your voice. Don't let it. You knew what you knew. Now trust it enough to take the next step. The observer's existence trap. There is a paradox that sits at the very heart of consciousness, a subtle trap that's easy to miss, but once glimpsed can never be unseen. It begins the moment you try to watch your own mind. You notice a thought, a flash of worry, a bright idea, a sudden longing, and you step back, becoming the observer. But in the very act of observing, you change the thought itself. Attention bends it, sharpens it, softens it, or makes it evaporate. You are not just a passive witness to your inner world. You are a participant, an editor, a painter forever touching up the canvas you are trying to study. This is the observer's existence trap, a loop where observing changes what is observed, and each change in turn transforms the one who observes. You try to sit still, to see yourself as you really are. Maybe it's during meditation, or a sleepless night, or a quiet walk where your mind drifts inward. You become aware of your thoughts as if they are clouds drifting through an open sky. But the moment you shine a light on any thought, it becomes something else. Worry becomes analysis. Joy becomes self-consciousness. Anger dissolves under scrutiny or grows sharper in response to the gaze. The act of seeing is never neutral. It is participation, an endless recursive dance. Science hints at this in the quantum world, where the act of measuring a particle changes its behavior, collapses its wave of possibilities into a single outcome. In consciousness, the act of attention collapses the sprawling mess of mind into one clear story, one sensation, one moment. But as soon as you look again, the landscape changes. You can never quite catch your mind as it is. Your presence rewrites the script each time you check. Try for a moment to watch yourself feeling something raw: fear, love, embarrassment, pride. As soon as you observe it, a part of you steps out of the experience and into commentary. I am feeling afraid. I notice I am angry. The feeling shifts, loses its sharp edge, becomes an object of study rather than pure sensation. You are caught in the loop. The observer alters the observed, and that shift changes the observer. Every new round brings a new self, a new angle, a new story about what is happening. This loop is both blessing and burden. It is the root of growth and also of suffering. You learn by observing yourself, catching patterns, shifting habits, questioning beliefs. But you also become trapped, never quite able to settle into a pure, unedited existence. There is always a watcher inside, narrating, judging, adjusting. You begin to wonder, what is the original self, if every act of observation creates a new version? Are you the thought, the watcher, or the story that emerges from their collision? This trap shows up in everyday life. You're at a party and suddenly aware of how you're standing, what you're saying, how you're coming across. Instantly, your body language stiffens, your words become careful, your laughter measured. The observer steps in, changing the observed, and you become self-conscious, a stranger to your own presence. Or perhaps you're writing, lost in the flow, until you start to wonder if what you're writing is good. The self-editor arrives, breaking the spell, shifting the creative current into self-critique. In love, in grief, in moments of transcendence, self-awareness can fracture the fullness of feeling, splitting the raw into the reflective. And yet, the observer's existence trap is not just limitation, it is also possibility. Because the self changes in each round of observation, you are never stuck, never static. You can grow, adapt, heal. You can catch yourself in the act of anger and soften. You can notice fear and breathe through it. You can sense joy and deepen it by choosing attention. The trap is also the tool, the recursive loop that allows you to edit your own story, to choose new responses, to reframe your life. Self-awareness is both the cage and the key, but peace, perhaps, comes in accepting the endlessness of this loop. You may never find the original untouched self. There may be no fixed point, no pure witness who stands apart from experience. Instead, you are the dance itself. The movement between observer and observed, between thought and awareness, between being and noticing that you are being. The loop never ends, but it also never has to. In the quiet spaces, when you surrender to this mystery, a strange freedom opens. You realize that every act of observation is creation. You are both author and reader, actor and audience, ever-changing, endlessly new. You stop trying to catch yourself in the act and instead allow the dance. You meet each moment with curiosity, knowing that to observe is to participate, to change is to live. So the next time you catch yourself watching your thoughts, watching yourself watching, smile at the paradox. The observer's existence trap is not a failure, but the heart of being conscious. You are always both inside and outside, both the wave and the collapse, both the thought and the one who notices. This loop is your freedom and your art, the ever-evolving self, forever changing in the very act of being seen. The memory as prediction. Most people think of memory as a storage vault, a dusty archive of all that has happened, a place where the past is locked away, unchanged, waiting to be accessed. But what if this is only half the story, or even less? What if memory is not so much a record as a prediction, a prophecy you cast forward, shaping the very things you will one day remember? In this world, to remember is not to look back, but to reach forward. Your recollections aren't merely echoes, but expectations. Blueprints for experiences that haven't even unfolded. The science of memory is stranger than most realize. Decades of research now suggest that your brain is not a passive historian, but an active fortune teller. Each day it draws on fragments of past experiences not only to recall, but to anticipate, to fill in gaps, to paint the blanks with what is most likely, most familiar, most safe. The mind is always rehearsing futures, even as it claims to reconstruct the past. Every memory you hold is colored, sometimes even created, by the predictions you make about what the world should feel like. Consider déjà vu, that eerie sensation that you've lived this moment before. Scientists believe it's a glitch in the prediction system. Your brain, primed by endless patterns, momentarily mistakes a new experience for an old one. It feels as though memory is leaking forward, as though you're remembering something before it happens. And in a sense, you are. Your mind is always forecasting, sketching outlines of what should be, and then filling them in with the colors of your actual experience. But it goes deeper. Every time you prepare for an important meeting, or a conversation with a loved one, or even a walk down a familiar street, your mind is already scripting the memory of it, shaping your expectations, priming your reactions, deciding in advance what will matter and what will fade. When the event finally happens, you don't experience it raw. You see it through the lens of what you predicted, the way the room should feel, the words you hope to hear, the reactions you expect. And later, when you remember, you recall not just the facts, but the predictions, folded together into a single seamless impression. Think about the last time you went on vacation. Before you even left home, you probably imagined the sun on your skin, the taste of food, the laughter of friends. These images weren't just idle fantasies, they were mental blueprints, sketches your mind built to guide your actual experience. As the days unfolded, you measured what happened against what you'd already imagined. Disappointments stung more when reality failed to meet prediction. Surprises felt electric because they broke the script. When you reminisce about that trip now, your memories are a blend, some of what actually happened, some of what you thought would happen, all tangled together into a prophecy remembered as fact. It's the same with relationships. You carry an internal script of every conversation, every look, every fight or reconciliation. You walk into rooms expecting certain smiles, certain wounds, certain silences. These predictions shape your memory even as events play out. Later, you'll remember not only what was said, but also the words you rehearsed and the outcome you feared or longed for. The boundary between expectation and recollection is never as clear as we think. This predictive nature of memory is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it makes life bearable. If you couldn't predict, you'd be overwhelmed by the chaos of raw experience. Patterns, expectations, and memory-based prophecies help you navigate the world with some sense of control. On the other hand, it means your memories are never objective. They're stories shaped by hope, anxiety, desire, and fear. Two people can live through the same moment and remember it in radically different ways. Not because they experience different facts, but because their predictions, formed by lifetimes of different memories, were different to begin with. Memory as prediction explains so many quirks of human psychology. Why are some people haunted by memories that never quite happened? Why do stories grow in the retelling? Why do traumas echo louder than ordinary days? It's because the mind is constantly folding the future into the past and the past into the future until the difference becomes a blur. Anticipated pain can become remembered pain. Longed-for happiness can become the memory of a joy you never actually felt, but wanted so badly you believed in it. Even nostalgia is a form of prophecy in disguise. When you remember the warmth of a childhood summer, the laughter at old gatherings, you are not only looking back, you are shaping the longing for what you want to feel again. Your mind replays the old scripts, rewriting the story until it fits the shape of the hope you now carry. You remember what you need, not what was, and that need becomes a map for what you seek in the future. There is a power and a danger in this. You can become trapped by your own predictions, seeing only what you expect, missing the surprises and gifts of the present. Or you can harness it. Use memory's prophetic nature to imagine new futures, to rewrite the script, to create the possibility of change. If remembering is a form of prophecy, then perhaps healing old wounds, seeking new adventures, or choosing kindness can echo forward, shaping not just what you will remember, but what you will become. So the next time you find yourself swept up in a memory, ask, am I recalling or am I predicting? Am I seeing the past as it was, or as I expected, feared, or hoped it would be? Realize that your mind is always building bridges between what has happened and what might happen next, weaving the two together until they are nearly inseparable. The mystery at the heart of memory is that it is never fixed. It is always in motion, a dance between what was, what is, and what might yet be. Every time you remember, you cast a small prophecy into your own life, shaping the stories you will tell, the moments you will notice, the future you will inhabit. And in this dance, this endless play between prediction and recollection, you become the author of your own unfolding story, always remembering the future, always foretelling the past. The mirror reflection belief. There's a subtle, nearly invisible loop running beneath the surface of your mind, a feedback circuit that shapes the reality you accept as true. It's called the mirror reflection belief, and it's the engine that drives so much of what you're certain about, yet rarely questioned. The idea is as disarmingly simple as it is powerful. You believe a thought because it mirrors your belief, and your belief only feels strong because the thought keeps reflecting it. This is not the logical ladder of reason we like to imagine, but a hall of mirrors, where thoughts and beliefs endlessly echo one another until the reflection feels solid, unbreakable. Think about it. A belief doesn't arrive fully formed, like a stone falling from the sky. It starts as a whisper, a stray thought. Maybe you're unworthy. Maybe the world is dangerous. Maybe you're destined for greatness. The thought floats up, and you don't just observe it. You hold it up to your inner lens, searching for resonance. If it fits something you already feel or fear, even a little, your mind lights up with recognition. You accept it, if only provisionally. But here's the trick. The moment you accept it, even tentatively, your attention changes. You start to notice evidence that supports the thought, ignore what contradicts it, and soon enough, your mind is a filter that catches only what strengthens the reflection. This echo chamber is both comforting and dangerous. The more your thoughts mirror your beliefs, the more your beliefs feel right. Doubt is squeezed out by the constant feedback until certainty hardens. But what you rarely see is that the entire structure is built on a foundation of reflections. There is no single source, no original truth, just the looping dance of thought and belief, each strengthening the other with every pass. It's easy to see this in others, hard to see it in yourself. Watch how a conspiracy theorist finds proof everywhere. Every news article, every coincidence, every rumor becomes a mirror that reflects and strengthens their belief. But the same loop operates in the everyday mind. If you believe you're unlucky, your brain will recall every misfortune, every lost opportunity, glossing over the moments of grace or luck. The thought becomes a belief. The belief colors your thoughts, and around you go until the mirrored wall becomes your world. This cycle explains why arguments rarely change minds. When someone challenges your belief, it's not just their words you're fighting. It's the shattering of a mirror you've come to trust. If their idea doesn't fit the reflection you're used to seeing, your mind discards it or twists it until it fits. Only something truly disruptive, a shock, a crisis, a deep moment of doubt, can crack the glass and let in something new. But the mirror reflection belief is not just a trap, it's also a clue. If you look carefully at the beliefs you hold most tightly, you'll see the hall of mirrors at work. The stories you tell yourself about who you are, what you're capable of, what's possible, they aren't just facts. They're reflections of earlier thoughts, memories, opinions you picked up from parents, friends, even strangers. Every affirmation, every criticism, every echo from the past contributes to the strength of the current belief. Consider how quickly a single negative comment can take root if it matches a hidden insecurity. The thought arrives, "I'm not good enough," and your mind checks the mirror. Does this fit what I fear? Yes, and suddenly the belief strengthens. You notice failures, downplay successes, and soon the belief is self-sustaining, bouncing off the mirrors until it feels like absolute truth. The same is true for positive beliefs, but these too are mirrors, not stones. So, what do you do with this knowledge? The first step is humility. Recognize that your most cherished beliefs may not be rock-solid facts, but looping reflections of thoughts you happen to accept. This doesn't mean there's no such thing as truth, but it means your access to it is filtered through a hall of mirrors. Doubt, in this context, becomes a gift, a way to step back and check if you're mistaking a reflection for reality. You can interrupt the loop. When a thought arises, don't just ask, "Is this true?" Ask, "Does this thought simply mirror what I already believe?" And, "Where did that belief come from?" Sometimes, just seeing the mirror is enough to weaken its power. Sometimes, you have to seek out discomfort, opinions and evidence that don't fit, that challenge the reflection. That's how new beliefs form, not by smashing the mirror, but by adding new angles, letting in more light. In the end, the mirror reflection belief reveals that certainty is a kind of illusion, a trick of the mind that feels solid because it's reflected on every side. The real world is messier, richer, more complex than any single belief can capture. If you can hold your convictions lightly, stay open to the play of reflections, you gain something rare, the freedom to change, to grow, to see not just the mirror, but the world beyond its glass. And that is where truth, however fleeting, is most likely to be found. The infinite regression question. Imagine sitting alone late at night, chasing a worry or a hope back to its source. Why do you fear rejection? Maybe because you want to be accepted. But why do you want acceptance? Because it feels good. Because it protects you from loneliness. Because somewhere long ago, someone made you feel like you needed to earn your place. But then, why does that matter? Every step backward reveals another layer, another memory, another hidden motive. Try to find the root, and you'll only discover more roots, tangled together, stretching far beyond what you can see or name. This isn't just a philosophical curiosity. It's the backbone of human self-reflection. We crave a solid answer, a first cause, an unmoved mover, a final because that will silence the endless questioning. But the mind is recursive. Thoughts generate thoughts. Beliefs rest on other beliefs. Motives coil inside one another like nested dolls. You think you've reached bedrock, only to realize the ground is moving, the foundation melting into more questions. Why do you want to be happy? Why is happiness good? Who decides what's good? What is the self that's even asking? The infinite regression question becomes especially haunting when you're searching for meaning or certainty. Maybe you're at a crossroads in your life, desperate for clarity. You interrogate your desires, your values, your fears. You want to know not just what you want, but why you want it, and why you want that, and so on. The deeper you go, the less stable things feel. Certainty dissolves into possibility. The need for a final answer transforms into a realization. Perhaps there isn't one. Perhaps the very act of questioning is endless, because the mind is not a straight line, but a spiral. This can be both liberating and terrifying. On one hand, it shows that no belief or motive is absolute. Everything is provisional, contingent, open to re-examination. You are not trapped by your current self. You can grow, adapt, revise your story endlessly. On the other hand, it means there is no ultimate authority, no cosmic parent who will step in with the last word. The search for why leads only to more searching, and eventually, to silence. When you run out of answers, you're left staring into the vastness of your own mind, a place where certainty is impossible, but freedom is real. Even scientists and philosophers fall into this loop. Every explanation in science relies on deeper assumptions, laws, constants, axioms that themselves can be questioned. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why do the laws of physics have the values they do? Every answer points to a deeper mystery. And even if you chase the chain back to the Big Bang or the structure of logic itself, you never reach a stopping point. The regression is infinite. There is always another why, another how, another door to open. In daily life, this can become paralyzing. Overthinking, anxiety, the inability to settle on any choice because you're haunted by questions you can't answer. But it can also be a source of compassion and humility. When you realize that everyone is running on an endless thread of why, it becomes easier to forgive their confusion and your own. Nobody has the final answer. Every certainty is a story told to calm the infinite sea of questioning underneath. Sometimes, the only thing to do is pause, to accept that the mind's nature is to ask, to seek, to unravel. There's no final authority waiting, no grand conclusion at the end of the inquiry. The infinite regression isn't a glitch in your thinking. It is thinking. The beauty and the burden of being human is to live inside questions that never end, to travel a path with no finish line, to search for reasons knowing there may be none. The wisdom comes not from finding the last answer, but from learning to dwell in the mystery itself. To let the spiral of why open you to wonder, not just to worry. So when you find yourself lost in infinite regression, questioning why you question and why you question that, know that you are not alone. This is the deep engine of consciousness, the endless echo that shapes every self-aware life. The final answer is not out there, waiting. The journey itself is all there is, and the mystery is not a flaw, but the source of all meaning you will ever find. The uncertainty-certainty paradox. You say, I don't know. You say it with conviction, even comfort, as if admitting uncertainty is the one thing you're sure of. But here's the paradox. Being absolutely certain that you are uncertain is still a form of certainty, one that collapses the moment you look too closely. This is the uncertainty-certainty paradox, when your confidence in not knowing becomes so solid that it starts to resemble knowing. And like all paradoxes, it doesn't like being observed. The moment you try to explain it, it changes, slips, shifts, folds back in on itself. At first, it feels like intellectual humility. You resist the temptation to have all the answers. You admit life is complex. You honor the unknown. You say, nothing is certain. But dig deeper, and you realize, you're certain about that. Your identity is now wrapped in not knowing. You wear uncertainty like armor, and that armor, ironically, becomes rigid, fixed, predictable. In trying to escape dogma, you build a quieter one. You begin to distrust certainty wherever you see it. You flinch at strong opinions. You recoil from decisive choices. You avoid commitment, not from fear, but from a deeper belief. Certainty is illusion, and maybe you're right. But if you're right, doesn't that mean you're certain again? That's the loop. You deny certainty with such confidence that it reappears disguised as your doubt. This paradox lives in the mind of thinkers, philosophers, skeptics. It hides in late-night conversations and existential spirals. It whispers, don't trust the answer, trust the question. But the moment you fully trust the question, haven't you made an answer of it? The uncertainty you claim becomes your anchor, your compass, your truth. And now, you're certain again. This is where people get stuck, not in ignorance, but in recursive introspection. They question their beliefs, then question the questioning. They trust nothing, except their mistrust. And slowly their inner world collapses into loops, circles that don't break, thoughts that undo themselves the moment they arise. You hear someone say, I'm not sure of anything anymore, and they say it like a final statement, a truth. But uncertainty by its nature resists being declared. The more certain you are that nothing is certain, the more fragile your logic becomes. Because if nothing is certain, then that too might be uncertain. The paradox doesn't live in language. It lives in experience. In the moment you're asked a question and respond with perfect doubt. In the decision you avoid because you're proud of how open-minded you are. In the identity built around not having an identity. In the belief that beliefs are the problem. You stand on a platform that disappears the moment you name it. And still, we need something to stand on. So what do? Do we pretend certainty doesn't matter? Do we chase it? Do we reject it entirely? The answer may not lie in either extreme. The answer may be to accept the paradox itself, not as a failure of thinking, but as a feature of it. To say, yes, I am uncertain, and I am certain of that. And I know it might dissolve, And I'm okay with that too. To live not with firm ground beneath your feet, but with trust in your ability to keep walking even when the floor gives out. That's not confusion. That's mental balance. That's the space between arrogance and despair, where you move forward without pretending to know, but without being paralyzed by doubt. Because uncertainty isn't weakness, it's awareness. But when awareness calcifies into doctrine, when your open mind becomes your new rigidity, you've lost the very freedom uncertainty offered. The uncertainty certainty. Paradox is not a riddle to solve, it's a mirror. It shows you the limit of your need to know. It reflects the fear beneath your need to declare not knowing, and it asks you, quietly, can you exist without fixing the coordinates of your existence? Not forever. Just for now. Can you admit, with tenderness, I don't know, without using it to prove that you're better, wiser, safer? Can you live in a question without needing to polish it into a conclusion? Because the truth is, no thought is permanent. No insight is untouchable. And even your deepest doubts will someday be doubted. This is not a crisis. This is the rhythm of being human. To know, then unknow. To stand, then shift. To say, I'm sure I'm not sure, and then smile as that certainty melts into mist. You are not the conclusion you reach. You are the curiosity that searches. You are not lost in doubt. You are shaped by it, softened by it, freed by it. So don't rush to escape the paradox. Breathe in it. It means you're alive. The thought loop identity. There's a paradox at the center of being human, one that haunts late nights, sparks lifelong quests, and hides in the quiet moments when you ask, who am I really? You turn inward, searching for something solid, a core that defines you, a self that can be known and named. So you think. You analyze your past, question your choices, sift through memories and dreams, untangle your beliefs. You dig, hoping to unearth the answer. But every act of thought is not just discovery, it's creation. The more you search, the more you shape the very self you're trying to find. This is the thought loop identity. You think to know yourself, but each thought is a brushstroke on a canvas that's never finished, a loop where identity is defined by the pursuit, not the answer. You start with questions, believing there's an objective truth waiting somewhere inside. Who am I beneath the masks, the roles, the stories? But as you think, new layers emerge. The self you uncover is different from the one you started with. You recall a childhood memory, and suddenly you're a storyteller, giving meaning to your past. You imagine a future and become a dreamer. You regret a decision and become a judge. Each turn of thought constructs a new version of you, layered with hopes, fears, judgments, and desires. It's a process that never ends. The more you think, the more you invent, assemble, edit, erase. You chase the real self. But each act of reflection adds to the self you're chasing. You ask, what do I believe? And as you examine your answer, you shape and reshape those beliefs. You wonder, what do I love? And the act of naming changes the thing itself. You try to catch the original, but find only the latest draft. This loop shows up everywhere. In moments of joy, you ask if you deserve it. In moments of pain, you search for meaning, making the wound a chapter in your ongoing story. You tell yourself you're searching for authenticity, but the search itself is generative. Your identity is rewritten with every question asked, every answer considered, every angle explored. It's tempting to see this as a trap. You want to step outside the loop, to discover a self that exists before thought, untouched by narrative or interpretation. You imagine a moment of pure revelation, where everything falls away and only you remain. But the moment you try, you are back in the loop, the watcher watching, the thinker thinking about thinking, the self defining itself by the very act of looking. Psychologists and philosophers have wrestled with this paradox for centuries. Some say the self is just an illusion, a trick of memory and language, a house built from habits and stories with no real occupant inside. Others argue that the self is real, but ever-changing, a process rather than a thing, a dance rather than a statue. In either case, the act of searching for identity is what gives the self its shape. The thought loop identity can be disorienting. You may wonder if you will ever arrive, if you will ever know yourself fully. But perhaps that's not the point. Maybe the journey is the answer. Maybe the act of questioning, the willingness to reflect and revise, is the very thing that makes you real. You are not a static core, but an evolving story, a river whose shape is changed by every stone it passes, every current that stirs. Consider the moments when your mind is quiet, when thought pauses and you simply are, walking in nature, losing yourself in music, holding someone you love. For a breath, you are not chasing or naming or analyzing. You are presence, wordless, infinite. But soon enough, the thoughts return, and with them, the loop resumes. You think, and in thinking, you become. There's freedom in embracing the loop. If identity is shaped by pursuit, then you are never stuck, never finished, never fixed in place by the stories of your past. You can change. You can grow. You can choose new thoughts, invent new stories, let go of old names. The loop is not a cage, it's a spiral, carrying you through each season of your life, making you both the author and the protagonist of your own becoming. So, the next time you find yourself lost in thought, wondering who you truly are, smile at the paradox. The search is the self. The thought is the answer. You are both the seeker and the found, forever incomplete, forever being made new in the loop of your own attention. This is not a failure of identity. It is the living pulse of what it means to be human, always in motion, always questioning, always creating yourself in the very act of looking for what is already, and only ever, here. The belief that needs doubt. We are taught to treasure certainty. We celebrate the unshakable conviction of the hero, the activist, the lover, the one who knows without hesitation what is right and true. Yet, beneath every powerful belief, every cause you would stake your reputation or your life upon, lurks something far more fragile, far more necessary: doubt. This is the paradox at the heart of conviction. Your strongest beliefs are not proof against uncertainty. They are built on the edge of it. For a belief to matter, for it to live and breathe, it must always dance with its opposite. The belief that needs doubt is the only belief that can survive, for without challenge, conviction fades into the background hum of apathy. Think of the beliefs that shape you. Perhaps it is faith in a higher power, in justice, in love, or in the meaning of your own existence. Each of these starts with a question, a hunger, a lack. We turn toward belief because the world is uncertain, because life is chaos, because answers are hard to come by. We seek conviction the way a sailor seeks a lighthouse in a storm. But the very presence of that lighthouse only matters because of the darkness that surrounds it. Take away the storm, and the guiding light is just another object, easily ignored. Imagine two worlds. In one, your beliefs are never challenged. No one argues, no one disagrees, no evidence ever surfaces to cast doubt on what you hold dear. At first, this seems like paradise. At last, you are at peace, untroubled, immune to uncertainty. But quickly, the energy seeps out. Your certainty becomes routine. You stop examining it, stop feeling its urgency. The conviction that once burned now sits cold, inert, like an unused muscle. In the absence of doubt, your belief is no longer a living thing. It becomes background noise, a script you repeat without feeling, a ritual drained of meaning. In the other world, every belief is contested. You must defend it, explain it, test it against evidence and criticism. Here, belief is alive, a flickering flame, always vulnerable, always needing fuel. You revisit your reasons, you strengthen your resolve, you adjust where necessary. Doubt is not your enemy, but the wind that keeps the fire burning. The push and pull, the discomfort, the need to justify yourself, all conspire to keep your conviction sharp, relevant, and honest. This is not just philosophical poetry. It's rooted in psychology and experience. When you hold an untested belief, it sits in your mind's attic, gathering dust. When you face doubt, your own or that of others, you must choose. Do I still believe, and why? This act of questioning gives belief its vitality. The most resilient convictions have been tested, scarred, refined by fire. The ones that remain unchallenged rarely survive the first real test. Think about love. You might declare, "I will love you forever." And in that moment, you mean it absolutely. But the proof of love lies not in the ease of its expression, but in the trials it endures. When distance grows, when conflict erupts, when temptation or doubt arises, you are forced to ask, "Do I still love, and why?" The relationship grows stronger not despite the doubt, but because of it. The very act of recommitting, of wrestling with uncertainty, makes the love real. In this sense, doubt is the guardian of all that matters most. It is the same in faith, in politics, in any system of meaning. When belief is dogmatic, when it cannot be questioned or challenged, it becomes brittle, easy to shatter or discard. True conviction must be tested, shaped by opposing ideas, tempered by self-examination. The open mind is not weak, it is resilient. The belief that survives the crucible of doubt becomes more than a slogan. It becomes part of your bones, something you own because you have chosen it again and again. There is also a hidden danger in banishing doubt. When certainty becomes absolute, it turns into fanaticism. The mind that refuses to question itself is the mind that becomes blind, dangerous to itself and others. History is full of examples. Movements that began as noble causes, only to ossify into dogma, crushing dissent and innovation. The healthiest societies, like the healthiest individuals, build spaces for disagreement, for uncertainty, for the possibility that even cherished truths may one day need to change. Yet, doubt is uncomfortable. It keeps us awake at night, forces us to revisit decisions, exposes us to criticism. It is tempting to run from it, to build walls around our beliefs and declare them sacred, untouchable. But, in doing so, we rob them of meaning. Certainty without risk is empty. Conviction without vulnerability is inert. It is the struggle, the risk, the possibility of being wrong that gives belief its worth. So, how do you live with the belief that needs doubt? You embrace the discomfort. You seek out opposing views, listen to those who challenge you, and treat your own certainty as provisional, a hypothesis, not a verdict. You ask not only what do I believe, but why do I believe it, and could I be wrong? You treat every conviction as a living thing, always capable of growth, always in need of care. This approach is not weakness, but strength. It demands courage, the courage to face the unknown, to admit ignorance, to revise your story in the light of new evidence. It is the only way belief can stay alive, dynamic, and true. Doubt is not the enemy of conviction, but its necessary companion, the shadow that sharpens the light. In the end, the beliefs that define us are not the ones we inherited unquestioned, but the ones we have wrestled with, doubted, and chosen anyway. They are the principles that have survived challenge, the loves that have survived hardship, the hopes that have survived despair. Without doubt, these would be empty forms. With doubt, they become the living core of who we are. So when you feel the tremor of uncertainty beneath your strongest convictions, do not run. Welcome it. Let it breathe. Let it do its work. Because the belief that needs doubt is not a weakness. It is the mark of a mind alive, a heart engaged, a life that refuses to settle for easy answers. It is the only kind of belief worth having, and the only kind that endures. The choice without decider. There's a haunting paradox at the core of human consciousness, the illusion of authorship, the persistent sense that there is a decider behind every choice, a thinker behind every thought. We move through our days believing we're steering the ship, selecting ideas, making decisions, guiding our inner monologue with deliberate force. But if you stop for even a moment and look for the source, the actual chooser, the self at the heart of choice, you find nothing solid. There is only thought itself, followed by more thought, an endless river with no clear point of origin. This is the enigma of the choice without decider, a realization both unsettling and strangely liberating, a psychological mirror that reflects back the emptiness behind the curtain of will. Pause and examine any choice you've made today. Did you decide to think that thought, or did it simply arise? When you reach for a cup of coffee, where did the urge begin? You might say, I wanted it, but where did the wanting come from? Did you choose the desire, or did it emerge unbidden from the dark soil of memory and habit? Trace your choices backward. What you'll find is not a steady hand on the controls, but a branching web of influences. Childhood, advertising, hunger, anxiety, the mood of the morning, even the weather outside. Each thought, each apparent choice arises as the effect of 1,000 unseen causes, and the supposed decider is nowhere to be found. The sense of agency, the feeling that you are the thinker of your thoughts, is one of the most persistent illusions the mind creates. Neuroscientists have peered into the brain and seen choices light up milliseconds before the conscious mind is aware of making them. Thoughts bubble up from the depths, and only afterward does the mind weave a story of intention. We are like the king who claims credit for every sunrise, narrating a tale of control while the machinery of thought hums along in silence, indifferent to our self-image. And yet, this illusion is not a flaw, it's a feature of consciousness. It creates a sense of unity, a story of me at the center of experience. But what happens if you look closer? Really look, with the full force of attention, into the space between thoughts. You'll find an eerie absence. There is no thinker, just thinking. No chooser, just the unfolding of choices. The mind is a theater where scenes play out, and the actor called the decider is only a role, not a reality. This realization can be disorienting. We are raised to believe in free will, to take responsibility for our thoughts, to claim authorship over the mind's contents. But in the quiet gaps, during meditation, in the middle of the night, in moments of shock or awe, you glimpse the truth. Thoughts come and go, like clouds drifting across the sky, and the effort to control them is like trying to command the weather. You may try to push a thought away, only for another to spring up in its place. You may try to choose happiness, calm, focus, only to watch as the mind returns again and again to its habits. This does not mean you are powerless or that effort is meaningless. It means the story is stranger than you imagined. What you call choice is the result of countless causes rippling through the depths of consciousness, many of them hidden, many not your own. Even your will to change is itself a thought arising, not chosen, but given. Examples of this paradox are everywhere. The artist waits for inspiration, only to find ideas arrive unannounced, often when least expected. The anxious mind resolves to stop worrying, only for another worry to slip in through the cracks. The philosopher asks, "Who am I?" and finds only the echo of the question. The spiritual seeker sits in meditation, searching for the self behind the self, and in the end, finds only stillness, a vast impersonal awareness in which thoughts arise and pass, each without a visible author. The choice without decider is not a recipe for despair, but an invitation to a new kind of humility, a recognition that we are the stage on which thoughts and choices appear, not their secret source. This view can open the door to compassion, for ourselves and for others. If no one is truly the architect of their own mind, if we are all swept along by unseen forces, how can we judge ourselves so harshly? How can we cling to guilt, pride, shame, or even blame, knowing that the self is not the master, but the witness? To see this clearly, even for a moment, is to experience a kind of freedom. You don't have to fight with your thoughts or pretend to control what appears in consciousness. You can let go, observe, and allow the mind to unfold. In that space, a deeper intelligence sometimes shines through, not the voice of a hidden decider, but the quiet wisdom of seeing things as they truly are. The world keeps spinning, choices keep unfolding, but the burden of authorship falls away, replaced by a lighter, more open awareness. So the next time you catch yourself believing you are the thinker, the chooser, the decider behind the scenes, pause and look for the one who is choosing. Watch as the search collapses into more thinking. See the emptiness at the center, the silent stage where life plays out. In that emptiness, there is a quiet peace, and a mystery that no amount of thinking can ever fully resolve. The awareness of awareness. There's a strange, almost dizzying moment when you suddenly realize you're aware, not just awake, not just perceiving, but actually noticing your own noticing. The room around you fades a little, thoughts and sensations slow, and a spotlight turns inward. You are not just seeing, hearing, feeling, you are witnessing the act of witnessing itself. This is the awareness of awareness, a moment when the mind folds in on itself, blurring the boundaries between subject and object, watcher and watched. For most of the day, you drift in a stream of thoughts and experiences. You feel hunger, answer messages, walk down hallways, react, remember, plan. Awareness is always present, but it runs quietly in the background, invisible and unexamined. But sometimes, by accident or in a moment of meditation or stillness, you notice that you are noticing. Your awareness becomes its own object. You are not just aware of the world, but of your own awareness, like a mirror reflecting another mirror into infinity. This inward turn creates a strange feedback loop. Who is the one observing? And who is being observed? The more closely you look, the more the old distinctions begin to blur. In that moment, you become both the subject, the one who is aware, and the object, the awareness itself. It's as if your mind is holding a flashlight that suddenly turns around to illuminate its own source. The experience can be unsettling, but also deeply profound. For a split second, you see behind the curtain of your own mind. You notice that all experience, all thought, all feeling is happening within this field of awareness. Everything you know, everything you believe, is filtered through this single mysterious faculty. The capacity to know that you know. This self-reflexive awareness is sometimes called meta-consciousness. Philosophers and mystics have explored it for centuries. The ancient Upanishads called it the witness within the witness. Modern neuroscience tries to trace its origins in the brain's default mode network, the regions involved in self-reflection and inner monitoring. But no scientific model can quite capture the living, throbbing mystery of the moment you see yourself seeing. It's not just an abstract curiosity. The awareness of awareness can change the way you experience life. When you step back and notice your own consciousness, thoughts become less sticky, emotions less overwhelming. You are no longer completely fused with every story running through your mind. Instead, you glimpse the space in which all thoughts and feelings arise. Even pain, anxiety, or fear is seen from a new vantage point, not just as something happening to you, but as an event inside a wider field of presence. Sometimes, this awareness spirals into paradox. If you are aware of being aware, then who or what is aware of that awareness, and so on, in an infinite regress. Each layer pulls you deeper, like falling through a series of ever-opening doors. This is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to inhabit. The mind, it seems, is not just a machine for solving problems. It is a luminous space, capable of reflecting upon itself endlessly. Some traditions teach that resting in this awareness is the root of freedom. When you are aware of being aware, you're less trapped by your thoughts, less defined by your worries or memories. You're anchored in something deeper and more stable, the silent watcher behind the endless play of mind. For a brief moment, you are not just the character in your story. You are also the author, the witness, and the stage. And then, usually the loop collapses. You get pulled back into thought, into the next task, the next problem. The window closes, but the memory lingers. A faint echo of that impossible vantage point, where subject and object dissolved, where you saw not just the world, but the very faculty by which the world is known. The awareness of awareness is a rare, slippery gift, one that can't be summoned on demand, but arrives unexpectedly, opening a space of stillness at the heart of experience. In those moments, you glimpse the core of consciousness itself, mysterious, silent, ungraspable. You are not just alive, you know that you know you're alive. And for a heartbeat, that is enough. The question that answers itself. Some questions don't seek truth. They present it, disguised as doubt. You ask, what if I'm not good enough? But part of you already believes you aren't. You ask, what if they never cared? But the pain in your voice betrays the answer you've already chosen. This is the question that answers itself. A silent mental maneuver where the question is not inquiry, but camouflage. A hidden answer dressed in the costume of curiosity. It feels like you're exploring, like you're being honest. But the truth is, you're reinforcing what you already fear. Your brain isn't neutral when it asks. It's emotional. It knows where it's steering. A question like, why do I always mess things up? Doesn't invite multiple outcomes. It funnels your thinking into a narrow hallway, a hallway built by insecurity. You're not seeking an answer. You're repeating a belief. And the question becomes the excuse. This trick happens in quiet moments, right before sleep, after rejection, in the aftermath of silence. Your mind whispers something that sounds like a question, but hits like a verdict. What if they are better off without me? That's not wondering. That's self-erasure with a poetic tone. That's your doubt pretending to be curious. You're not asking. You're confessing. And what's worse, the mind rewards this behavior. It gives you imaginary answers that match the fear. They didn't care. You weren't enough. You always do this. Now the question feels resolved, but the resolution is ruin. And because you asked it, it feels more valid, more personal. You trust the answer because it came in your own voice. That's the camouflage. This loop happens because the brain wants closure, even if it hurts. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. So we ask questions not to explore possibilities, but to generate pain we already expect. We find comfort in prediction, even when the prediction is hopeless, and that's how questions become weapons. Soft blades, gentle seeming, but sharp in how they shape your self-image. Think about how many times you've asked something that only made sense if you already believed the worst. What if they never loved me? What if I'll always feel this way? What if I peaked already? The very structure of those questions frames reality in a particular tone. They don't leave much space for surprise. They invite the answer that hurts most, and once received, they pretend it came from logic, but really, it came from longing. A longing to validate pain with thought. You convince yourself, I'm just being realistic. But realism isn't always clarity. Sometimes it's just fear with good posture. So, what do you do with these self-answering questions? First, you slow down. Ask, where did this question come from? Is it rooted in evidence or emotion? Is it reaching outward or looping inward? Does it expand your mind or lock it in place? Next, invert it. Take the question and flip it into its opposite. If your mind asks, what if I'm a failure? Try, what if I'm more capable than I realize? Let both questions sit beside each other. Feel how the first one tightens, the second one opens. Notice how strange it feels to consider a kind answer. That discomfort? That's your mental bias resisting light. And finally, ask a real question. One that has no emotional script attached. One that isn't loaded. One that truly seeks. Something like, what do I not yet understand about this? Or, what would I tell someone else in this exact moment? Because real questions aren't traps, they're doorways. But your mind will offer you the fake ones first, the ones dressed in your fears, the ones built from old wounds, and you must learn to recognize them. Not to silence them, but to stop believing them as truth. Because the question that answers itself is a mental shortcut, and shortcuts don't build strength. They build cages. It's okay to doubt. It's human to wonder. But wonder without curiosity is just self-punishment dressed as introspection. Be suspicious of the question that only offers one answer. Be skeptical of thoughts that feel too familiar, especially when they hurt. Ask yourself, would I ask this question if I were calm? If the answer is no, it's not a question. It's a wound whispering its name. And wounds don't need answers, they need care. So, instead of asking, why am I like this? Ask, what does this feeling want me to see? Instead of, what if it's too late? Ask, what small thing can I do now? And instead of, what if I never change? Ask, what if the change has already begun and I just haven't noticed yet? That's how you rewire the question. Not by forcing positivity, but by removing the illusion that the question was innocent to begin with. You are not your fears dressed as thoughts. You are not your doubts with punctuation. You are the one who decides which questions deserve your attention and which ones were never really questions at all. The memory that forgets. Memory feels like a treasure vault, a storehouse of everything you've lived. You trust that when you reach inside, summoning a face, a place, a moment of triumph or pain, you're touching the past itself. You imagine that your memories are preserved like fossils, unchanged and reliable, evidence of who you are and what you've seen. But there's a deeper, stranger truth. Every time you remember, you are not reaching for a photograph, but for a living thing. A memory that forgets, shifts, and rewrites itself with every act of recall. What you remember is not what happened, but what you last remembered. It's unsettling to realize that your mind isn't an archive, but a storyteller. Each time you summon a memory, your brain must reconstruct it from scattered fragments. Sensations, emotions, guesses, gaps filled in with context and imagination. This process is active, not passive. The act of remembering is also an act of editing. Details sharpen or fade, feelings change shape, meaning is added or lost. And when the memory is stored away again, it carries the fingerprints of the present, subtly changed, ready to become the new version you'll recall next time. This isn't just philosophical, it's science. Neuroscientists call it reconsolidation. When you recall a memory, the neural networks that store it become flexible, vulnerable to change. In the seconds and minutes after recall, the memory is rewritten, mixed with new emotion, influenced by what you believe now, colored by how you feel today. When you put it back, it's not what it was. The original, if it ever existed, is gone. Think of the stories you tell about your childhood, the way you remember a birthday, a family vacation, a heartbreak. Each retelling polishes the tale, embellishing some parts, erasing others. You start to remember the story, not the event. You begin to trust the narrative, even when friends or family recall it differently. Even when the facts become uncertain, the memory you carry is no longer a window to the past, but a mirror reflecting who you are now. The effect is even stronger for emotional memories. The pain of a loss, the joy of a triumph, the sting of betrayal, all are remade each time you revisit them. If you recall a sad memory while feeling hopeful, the sadness may soften. If you recall it while anxious or bitter, it might grow sharper, darker, more permanent. Over years, decades, lifetimes, your most precious memories may have drifted far from their origins, becoming stories you live by, but stories you've unconsciously rewritten. There is a gentle tragedy here, but also a kind of freedom. You are not bound forever to your first pain, your first mistake, your first joy. Each recall is a chance to heal, to revise, to bring compassion to old wounds. But it also means that you can lose what you once had, that what you treasure as truth is always, in some way, a creation. The past is not fixed. It changes as you change. Sometimes, this truth becomes apparent in the smallest ways. You argue with someone about what really happened, a detail in a conversation, the order of events on a meaningful day. Both of you are certain, but both of you are wrong in small ways. Your memories have diverged, each shaped by the countless times you've remembered them, edited by emotion, need, and time. The more often you recall, the further you drift from what actually was. This is why nostalgia can be so haunting. You return to an old place, see an old friend, revisit an old photograph, and something feels missing or wrong. The world has changed, but so have you. And the memory you bring is not the one you left with. There is no way back to the unedited original. You are always living with the memory that forgets. But there is beauty, too, in this imperfection. You are not a prisoner of the past. You can forgive, can reinterpret, can choose to remember with kindness. The flexibility of memory is a survival skill, a way to make peace with what cannot be undone. You can find meaning in the stories you shape, even knowing they are not perfect replicas of reality. To live with this truth is to become a gentle curator of your own experience. You honor what you remember, but you let it breathe, let it evolve, accept its changes. You trust that the memory you hold now is true for this moment, and that it may shift again as you shift. You understand that memory is not for preservation, but for growth, a living bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. So the next time you close your eyes and call up the past, remember, you are not revisiting what was, but what remains, what you last remembered, shaped by the person you are now. Memory is a living story, never quite the same, forever in the act of becoming. In that, perhaps, there is more truth than certainty ever promised. The self-denying assertion. Some paradoxes are so subtle that we trip over them without ever noticing. They hide in the words we speak, in the thoughts we deny, in the moments when we try to outrun our own minds. One of the strangest and most fundamental is the self-denying assertion, a mental Mobius strip where the very act of denial becomes proof of what you're denying. To say, "I am not thinking," is inescapably to think. To claim, "I am not aware," is, by necessity, to be aware enough to make the claim. This is the kind of paradox that quietly shapes the edges of consciousness itself, exposing the impossibility of ever fully stepping outside your own mind. Let's unravel this curious knot. Imagine you're meditating, eyes closed, chasing that elusive state of pure stillness. No thoughts, no distractions, just emptiness. At some point, a thought slips in. "Ah, now I am not thinking." Instantly, the paradox springs shut. That very observation is a thought. The attempt to witness the absence of thinking brings thinking roaring back, disguised as silence. The act of denying a thought is itself an act of thought. This isn't just a semantic trick. It is a window into how self-awareness works. Consciousness is recursive. It loops back on itself, able to observe itself in real time. But that observation creates the very thing it hopes to escape. Try not to think about something, and you summon it instead. Try not to notice yourself breathing, and suddenly every breath is loud and labored. The self-denying assertion is a trap set by language, but it is also a structural property of the mind itself. The roots of this paradox run deep. Philosophers have wrestled with it for centuries. The ancient Greek liar paradox, this statement is false is a cousin to the self-denying assertion. To assert something about the absence of assertion is to create a logical whirlpool, an endless loop that collapses in on itself. In the domain of consciousness, the trap is even tighter because the subject and the object are the same. You are both the thinker and the thing being thought about. There's no way out. Consider the everyday ways this paradox unfolds. Someone asks, "What are you thinking about?" And you reply, "Nothing." But to answer is to search your mind, to check for thoughts, to construct a response. In that instant, nothing becomes something, an idea, a report, a small act of mental activity. Or imagine the classic moment before sleep when you try to quiet your mind. You might assure yourself, "I am not thinking about tomorrow," but the act of assuring is already tomorrow-minded. The assertion contains the seed of its own undoing. Even denial of emotion falls into this trap. "I'm not angry," you might say, teeth clenched, heart racing. But the energy it takes to insist you're not angry is itself a signal of anger. The louder the denial, the clearer the evidence. The paradox is unavoidable. To name the absence of something is to invoke it, to bring it into being through the act of observation and language. This paradox shows up in spiritual traditions too. In Zen practice, the student is told to clear the mind, to banish thought and simply be. But the harder you try, the more tangled you become. The effort to not think becomes the new object of thought, just as the effort to just be becomes a loop of questioning and analysis. Masters sometimes point this out by asking, "Who is it that is not thinking?" The question explodes the illusion of absence and returns you, again and again, to the restless core of self-awareness. There is a strange comfort in this realization. The self-denying assertion reminds us that the mind cannot escape itself, that the urge to step outside our own consciousness is both impossible and, perhaps, unnecessary. You cannot witness your own absence. You cannot experience what it is like not to experience. To be aware is to be caught in a loop, a circle that cannot close, a light that always shines, even in its own shadow. This paradox is more than philosophical play. It shapes our emotional lives. Often the things we most forcefully deny, fear, sadness, longing, are the very things we are most preoccupied with. The mind, in its struggle to disown a feeling, gives it energy and shape. You say, "I'm not afraid," yet your attention is a tight coil around the very object of fear. You insist, "I don't care," yet the act of insisting reveals a core of vulnerability you can't quite bury. To fight a thought is to feed it. To deny an emotion is to sustain it. Even language itself is built on these loops. When you declare, "I have nothing to say," you have, in fact, said something. Silence, articulated, is no longer silence. Absence, named, is a kind of presence. There is no way to fully step outside the web of meaning, because to do so is to spin a new thread in the same web. Is there a way to escape this paradox? Perhaps not. But there is a way to live with it, by embracing the impossibility, by letting go of the struggle to not think, not feel, not be. The self-denying assertion becomes, then, a kind of meditation on the limits of self-awareness. Instead of chasing emptiness, you can rest in the simple fact of being, thinking, feeling, knowing that denial and assertion are two sides of the same coin, endlessly flipping in the light of consciousness. In the end, the self-denying assertion is a mirror held up to the mind, a reminder that, for all our longing to control or escape our own thoughts, we are always already inside them. To think you are not thinking is to prove, with each silent assertion, that the mind cannot leave itself behind. And in that strange, inescapable loop, perhaps there is a kind of freedom, the freedom to stop running, to simply witness, and to accept that every denial is itself a form of acknowledgement. Every attempt to escape is already a return. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "I am not thinking," or "I am not feeling," pause for a moment. Notice the loop, the elegant trap. Smile at the paradox of being human, a creature forever aware, forever thinking, even in the act of trying not to. In that awareness lies a secret. You cannot outrun your own mind, but you can learn to rest inside its endless, echoing hallways, at peace with the impossibility of ever being anywhere else. The impossible original thought. There's a strange and haunting truth about your inner life, a secret most people never fully confront. the impossibility of a truly original thought. You move through the world certain that your ideas, opinions, inspirations, and doubts are your own, forged in the furnace of your unique experience. But if you slow down and examine each thought as it arrives, a quiet suspicion starts to grow. Where did this come from? Did I invent it? Or did I absorb it from 1,000 voices? The words of parents, friends, authors, teachers, television, strangers, even the subtle undertones of culture itself. Every thought feels self-made the moment it lands, instantly woven into the fabric of your identity. But if you try to untangle its origin, it slips away, blending with everything that came before. Think back to the last strong opinion you held. Maybe about right and wrong, art, politics, love, or the meaning of success. The thought felt solid, yours, maybe even hard-won. But pause and trace it backwards. Was it seeded by a story you heard as a child? Was it shaped by a movie line, a song lyric, a friend's offhand comment, a trending meme? Each influence is so subtle, so thoroughly digested by your mind, that by the time the thought surfaces, you can no longer tell whether it was planted or discovered. This is the impossible original thought, the paradox that all thinking is a remix, yet every thought masquerades as an original when it appears. The mind is not a blank slate nor a locked vault. It is a sponge, soaking up the world, a tangled web of echoes and half-remembered lines, recombining fragments of everything it has ever witnessed. Even your wildest inventions are mosaics made from the raw material of memory and exposure. And yet, the illusion persists. Each new thought is announced with the quiet authority of, "I made this." You feel like an artist signing a canvas, when in truth, you are as much curator as creator. There are moments, of course, when inspiration strikes with such force that you feel touched by genius. The scientist scribbling equations in the dark, the poet startled by a phrase that feels pulled from nowhere, the child blurting out a question that stuns the room into silence. But even here, the source is mysterious. Neuroscience shows that ideas often rise from the deep well of the unconscious, a place shaped by years of absorption and unnoticed learning, where the line between original and inherited is blurry at best. Try this experiment. Write down every idea that pops into your mind for an hour. At the end, examine them one by one. Some will be easily traced, a phrase from a book, an image from a film. Others will seem mysterious, arising without clear source. But look closer, and you might recall a childhood memory, a teacher's voice, a snippet from a dream. The boundaries of your own mind dissolve, revealing an endless loop of influences that run through you, as if you are not the origin, but the crossroads where thoughts meet, merge, and move on. This doesn't mean creativity is a lie, or that there's nothing special about your thoughts. Quite the opposite. The human gift is to synthesize, to remix, to give new shape and meaning to what's been gathered. But the story we tell ourselves, that our best ideas are born from nothing, pure and untouched, is a comforting illusion. Every artist, inventor, or philosopher stands atop the invisible scaffolding of borrowed insight. Every language is inherited, every metaphor handed down, every emotion learned through shared stories. What feels original is, more often than not, a new combination, rare, beautiful, but not conjured from a void. The danger comes when you cling too tightly to the belief that your thoughts are uniquely yours. It's a recipe for arrogance, for misunderstanding, for division. You defend an opinion as if it is part of your flesh, when in fact, it is the echo of 100 others. The impossible original thought reminds you of your deep interconnectedness with everyone and everything. It is a call to humility, to recognize that your mind is a crossroads, not a citadel. And yet, there is a kind of liberation in this realization. If no thought is truly original, then you are free to let go of the burden of absolute ownership. You can engage with ideas as a traveler, borrowing, adapting, and contributing as you go. You can become more curious, more open, more willing to change and be changed. The boundaries of self soften, the horizon widens, and every new thought becomes not a declaration of solitary genius, but an invitation to deeper connection with the world that made you. So the next time a thought arrives and insists, "I am yours alone," smile at its confidence and then gently ask, "Where did you come from?" Listen for the echoes. See if you can follow them back, through memory, through story, through culture, through the silent network of minds that shaped you. In that search, you might just find the impossible, the realization that every thought is both self-made and borrowed, both singular and shared, and that what matters is not ownership, but the life you give it once it's yours. The rejection dependency. Think about your deepest beliefs, the things you defend, the truths you're willing to argue for, the values you hold close. Now ask yourself, would those beliefs feel as real, as unshakable, if you'd never confronted alternatives, if you'd never felt the sting of rejecting an opposing idea? Most of us assume our convictions spring up fully formed, anchored in reason or instinct. But beneath every belief lies a hidden architecture, a scaffold built from the things we've decided to push away. This is the rejection dependency, the strange psychological law that belief gains its power not only from what it embraces, but from what it rejects. Early in life, beliefs are like open windows. Children are curious, absorbing new ideas from everywhere, rarely drawing hard lines. But as you grow and encounter the world's mess of conflicting opinions, you're forced to choose. Every time you say no to one perspective, the yes you give to another grows sharper, more defined. The process is often emotional, not just rational. You might reject a friend's worldview in a heated debate, or quietly distance yourself from a community whose values no longer fit. Each rejection makes your chosen stance feel more yours, more hard-won, more meaningful, even if it's rooted in nothing more than the need to define yourself against something else. The irony is that the power of belief is inseparable from its shadow. Take any ideology, any faith, any fiercely held opinion. It exists in relief against the things it denies. If you're certain that hard work brings success, part of that certainty comes from dismissing the stories where luck or injustice rule. If you believe in nonviolence, that conviction is strengthened by the violence you refuse to accept. Even the skeptic, who prides themselves on doubt, is only certain of their skepticism by rejecting the certainty of others. Each belief draws its outline from the negation of its opposite. This isn't just a philosophical quirk. It's how identity is built. Who you are, at a deep level, is shaped by the boundaries you set, the things you say, "not me," to. These rejections may come with conflict, guilt, or even loneliness, but they're necessary. Without them, your sense of self would be a blur, undefined, shapeless, vulnerable to collapse at the slightest pressure. Every belonging needs its borders. Even love is defined, in part, by the boundaries of what it excludes, but this dependency on rejection can turn dark. When belief is defined too strongly by what it opposes, it hardens into dogma, rigidity, and even hatred. The us versus them instinct can spiral, making it easy to dehumanize those who think differently, to see dissent not as dialogue, but as a threat. History is littered with examples of beliefs that became weapons. Ideologies fueled more by their enemies than by their own inherent goodness. When you need an adversary to feel whole, your certainty becomes brittle, always searching for someone to reject. The paradox is clear. Without rejection, belief has no backbone. But with too much rejection, it turns toxic, defensive, closed. The healthiest beliefs, perhaps, are those that know their own dependency, that don't hide from the oppositions that gave them shape. They acknowledge the struggle, the choices, the doubts that had to be cast aside. They can hold space for the rejected other without letting go of what matters most. So, the next time you feel certain, utterly convinced that your way is right, your truth unshakable, pause for a moment and look at the silhouette behind your conviction. What did you have to reject to feel this way? Whose story did you refuse? Which ideas did you exile to the margins? Your certainty is not a sign of purity. It's a sign of history, of friction, of a self that was sculpted not in a vacuum, but in a battleground of alternatives. Every belief is a survivor of rejection, carrying scars and shadows you may never see. And maybe, in knowing this, you can soften, not your values, but the edge with which you hold them. Belief is stronger for what it has opposed, but it is wiser when it remembers where its strength came from. In this awareness, your convictions become less brittle, more compassionate, and maybe, just maybe, more open to change. Not because you lack principles, but because you finally see the whole picture, the embrace and the rejection, both essential, forever entwined. The certainty mirage. There are moments when you feel sure, unshakably, solidly sure, about a choice, a belief, a person. The world sharpens, the noise quiets, you feel anchored, clear. And in that clarity, you find relief. Finally, you think, I know. But certainty, real, absolute certainty, is almost always a mirage. It feels stable, not because it's built on pure truth, but because you've lost sight of the hidden doubts holding it up from below. This is the certainty mirage, the illusion of knowing something completely, when in fact, you've simply stopped noticing the questions that still whisper beneath the surface. Certainty feels safe. It calms the chaos of indecision. It ends the spiral. It lets you move forward without looking back. And so, the brain rewards it. It makes you feel grounded, centered. But that feeling, it's not proof. It's sedative. Because certainty doesn't emerge from the absence of doubt. It often emerges from the suppression of it. You've seen this before, in others, in yourself. The person who insists they're right, loudly, passionately, without pause. The more they speak, the more their words harden into concrete. But if you dig a little, you notice something. They're not defending truth. They're drowning out the possibility that they could be wrong. The volume is armor. The repetition is a shield. Deep certainty often hides deep fear. And the human mind is clever. When it wants to believe something, it builds elaborate scaffolding to support it. Stories, justifications, selective memories, emotional rewards. It constructs an inner cathedral and then forgets how it was built. You walk through it and say, this is solid. But you're standing on beams of bias, wires of emotion, pillars of assumption. And because they're hidden, the illusion holds. You trust your own foundation, not realizing it was assembled, not discovered. This is not a failure of intelligence. It's a feature of being human. We all crave the end of uncertainty. We all want to know we're right, that we chose well, that our instincts were correct. But the moment we need to be certain, we stop listening. And the moment we stop listening, the mirage begins. Here's the danger. When certainty becomes identity, it resists correction. You can't let it break without feeling like you might break. So you defend it at all costs. You dismiss nuance. You ignore contradiction. You hold on not because you're right, but because you're terrified of the collapse. The mind protects its mirages, but if you look closely, really look, you'll notice the cracks, the little ways you avoid certain topics, the subtle anxiety when someone challenges you, the tension in your chest when someone else seems more sure than you. These aren't signs of deep belief. They're signs of suppressed doubt rising through the floorboards. And the truth is, doubt never really leaves. It just hides. And when it hides, it builds pressure. Until one day, through heartbreak, contradiction, disappointment, it pierces the illusion. And what once felt like a fortress collapses into a question you should have asked years ago. So what do? You stop treating doubt as poison. You stop fearing the cracks. You stop chasing absolute clarity like it's the finish line of growth. Because it isn't. It's a resting place, a temporary comfort on a long and uncertain road. Real confidence doesn't come from being certain. It comes from being able to hold uncertainty without crumbling. It comes from saying, I believe this, but I'm listening. It comes from knowing the scaffolding exists and choosing to stand anyway. Because the person who never questions themselves isn't stronger. They're simply farther from their own complexity. And complexity is not weakness, it's wisdom. You can be committed and curious, sure and soft, firm in your steps, but light in your grip. That's how you avoid the mirage, by admitting it might be one. Certainty, when healthy, is not a wall, it's a window, a view from which you see more, not less. And when it starts to feel too flawless, too final, too clean, you ask, what doubt am I not seeing? Not to collapse your belief, but to let light in, because light only enters where you leave a gap. And those gaps, that's where truth breathes. The belief loop trap. We spend our lives convinced that we see things clearly, that our judgments are sharp, our opinions rational, our perceptions pure. We pride ourselves on objectivity, on the ability to step outside our biases, to observe the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. Yet, beneath that certainty lies a hidden trap. The belief that you are objective is itself just another belief, shaped by the very subjectivity you hope to escape. You are caught in the belief loop trap, a recursive spiral where conviction feeds perception, and perception cements conviction, forever circling the promise of perfect clarity, never quite arriving. You notice this paradox in the smallest moments. You listen to a debate and are sure that your side is guided by facts, reason, evidence, while the other is blinded by feeling, prejudice, agenda. You read an article that confirms what you already believe and feel satisfied. The world truly is as you suspected. You spot a flaw in someone else's logic, but miss the cracks in your own. All the while you tell yourself, I'm different. I see things as they are. But step back and you begin to notice the loop. Your belief in your own objectivity is the very thing that blinds you to your biases. Psychologists have a name for this, the bias blind spot. You see the cognitive traps that catch others, their confirmation bias, their selective memory, their tendency to interpret everything in their favor. But your own mind feels transparent, immune, reasonable. It's as if you're standing outside yourself, looking down on your thoughts, sure that you are the exception. Yet the more you insist on your own objectivity, the deeper you spiral into subjectivity. You construct arguments, find evidence, shape memories, all in service of defending the belief that you are above belief. The loop is reinforced every day. The books you choose, the news you consume, the conversations you entertain, each one is filtered by your convictions. When new information arrives, your mind sifts it automatically, amplifying what fits, discarding what does not. If you're honest, you can feel the satisfaction when a headline proves you right, the discomfort when it challenges you, the subtle mental gymnastics you perform to make the world make sense. The trap is that you don't notice the gymnastics. You only feel the relief of certainty. Social media accelerates the loop, offering a custom-tailored reality where your views are echoed and amplified. You join groups, follow influencers, curate your feed, until the world seems perfectly aligned with your private beliefs. Dissent becomes rare, and when it appears, it seems irrational, even dangerous. The echo chamber is not just external, it is internal. Your own mind becomes a closed circuit, reinforcing itself with every new thought. It's tempting to believe you can break out. You try to be open-minded, to play devil's advocate, to consider the other side. But even these efforts are shaped by the desire to maintain your self-image as fair and rational. The loop bends to accommodate every new twist. If you change your mind, you congratulate yourself on your flexibility. If you hold fast, you celebrate your discernment. Either way, the belief in your objectivity survives, adapting to whatever evidence arrives. There is an existential loneliness in this trap. You want to know the world as it truly is, to touch reality without mediation, to know that your thoughts are not just shadows on the cave wall, but every act of knowing is shaped by belief, by language, by culture, by memory, by mood. You are always inside your own head, seeing through the glass of your own convictions, translating the world into a language only you can fully understand. And yet, there is a kind of freedom here. Once you see the belief loop trap, you can soften. You can stop defending your own objectivity and start questioning it. You can become curious about your blind spots, skeptical of your own certainty, willing to be wrong, eager to learn. The loop will not vanish. No one ever escapes their own subjectivity, but you can move through it with humility and awareness. You can listen more deeply, change your mind more freely, seek out what challenges you instead of what reassures. The wisest people know they are trapped. That is why they keep searching. They do not trust every feeling of certainty. They ask themselves, what am I not seeing? How might I be wrong? What if the world is stranger, more complex, more ambiguous than my mind allows? In asking these questions, they make the loop a tool, not a prison, a way to keep turning, keep growing, keep awakening to the ever-shifting ground of reality. So the next time you catch yourself certain of your own objectivity, pause. Notice the loop. Remember that your belief in clarity is just that, a belief. Smile at the paradox and step into the mystery of knowing that you will always see through a glass, darkly. Always circle the truth, never quite capture it. That is not a failure. It is what makes you human, and what makes humility the highest form of wisdom. The truth that lies. It's a strange and unsettling thing. How easily truth can become its own enemy. How a statement, so obvious and necessary that it must be repeated, can, through the very act of repetition, lose its soul, its reality, even its truth. This is the paradox at the heart of so much history, belief, and even personal conviction. The truth that lies. It is the fate of every slogan, every unquestioned value, every lesson taught by rote and never re-examined. A truth stated too many times becomes false, not because it was never real, but because it stops being examined and becomes an automatic dogma. It becomes a hollow chant, echoing long after its meaning has vanished. It starts innocently enough. A truth emerges, tested by reality or pain. Someone learns, perhaps through struggle, that honesty is the best policy, that love requires patience, that freedom matters. These insights, born from real experience, burn brightly at first. They are lived truths, fresh, raw, and alive. But because they are so important, they are shared, repeated, turned into advice, rules, even commandments. And with each repetition, something subtle changes. The words remain the same, but the attention behind them weakens. Instead of being experienced, the truth is recited. Consider the family that tells its children, always tell the truth. At first, this is a genuine lesson, passed on with stories and warnings, rooted in love and the hope of raising good people. But over time, the phrase becomes automatic, a reflex. The child repeats it back without thinking, learning that the performance of truth-telling matters more than the inner struggle to be honest. Sooner or later, the rule becomes brittle. The child learns to lie in clever ways, so long as the performance of truth is maintained. The truth, repeated so many times it no longer lands, now obscures the very reality it meant to defend. This happens everywhere, on grand scales and in quiet, personal ways. Political systems, born from noble ideals, fossilize their slogans until they are spoken by people who have long since forgotten their origins. Freedom, justice, unity. These words, so powerful in their first utterance, can become the masks for their own opposites when wielded by those who never question them. History is thick with examples. Revolutions that, in the name of liberty, become tyrannies. Movements that, while shouting equality, enforce new forms of division. The more a truth is shouted, the less it is questioned, and the more easily it becomes a lie. In your own life, you may notice this pattern in smaller, more personal ways. Maybe you've promised yourself to never give up. For a while, this mantra fuels your efforts, gets you through hard nights and harder mornings. But if you repeat it long enough, without pausing to ask what it really means, it can trap you, locking you into jobs, relationships, or habits that no longer serve you. Just because quitting would feel like a betrayal of the mantra, the truth, left unexamined, stops being a guide and becomes a prison. There is a psychological mechanism at play here. The mind adapts to repetition. What was once vivid and meaningful becomes background noise. You stop hearing the music when you play the same song too many times. In neuroscience, this is called habituation. The brain learns to ignore what it expects, what it has heard 1,000 times. And so, the truth, repeated without renewal, loses its force. It becomes a ritual, an incantation, a string of syllables without spirit. But the danger is greater than simple boredom or neglect. When a truth is repeated endlessly, it becomes unquestionable. You no longer examine it, because to do so would feel like heresy or betrayal. Instead, you defend it at all costs, even when evidence piles up against it. The truth, once a path to reality, becomes a fortress against reality. People cling to mantras long after they stop making sense, and whole societies can drift into absurdity, cruelty, or corruption by clinging to dogmas whose meaning has long since evaporated. Think of how easily we dismiss the wisdom of old proverbs. Patience is a virtue. Actions speak louder than words. We nod along, but rarely stop to ask if these truths are still true for us, in this moment, in this situation. They become invisible, background assumptions that shape our choices even as we forget to ask why. And yet, the original truth was real. The danger is not in having truths, but in failing to keep them alive. A truth that is never doubted, never examined, never risked, becomes brittle. It turns from a tool of understanding into a wall against it. The cure is not to abandon truth, but to keep it restless, to question it, to renew it, to live it again as if for the first time. This means looking behind the words. It means asking yourself every day, is this still true for me, for the world? It means being willing to revise, to let go, to risk being wrong. Only in the act of re-examination does a truth regain its force. Only in the willingness to doubt does belief stay alive. Paradoxically, doubt becomes the guardian of truth, and repetition its silent assassin. There is a kind of humility in this approach. It means accepting that your deepest convictions need maintenance, that they are not once and for all, but always provisional, always subject to life's next test. It means noticing when you are simply repeating yourself, when the words in your mouth have gone hollow. It means being brave enough to say, maybe I don't know, maybe this truth has changed. This is not an invitation to cynicism, but to vigilance. It's the only way to keep truth honest, to hold it to the standard of reality, to let it breathe and change and sometimes die. Only then can it be reborn, real again, alive again, something more than a slogan or a shield. So, the next time you find yourself repeating a cherished truth, pause. Ask where it came from, whether it is still serving you, whether it is still true. Remember that every truth, no matter how vital, can turn into a lie if you stop asking questions. In the end, it's the living, examined truths that light the way forward, not the empty echoes of what once was. The truth that lies is a warning and a call to keep your eyes open, your mind sharp, your convictions honest, and your words alive, so that the truths you live by do not become the very lies you fear the most. The disproven proof. You want certainty. You want proof, solid as stone, that your own mind is real, more than a flicker, more than a fleeting impression, more than just a story told by a voice in your head. But the moment you try to find that proof, you enter a hall of mirrors. Every argument, every sensation, every thought you use as evidence is itself produced by the very mind you're trying to verify. This is the disproven proof, the paradox at the heart of self-awareness, the haunting realization that you cannot step outside your own mind to confirm that it truly exists. Your witness, your evidence, your judge and jury are all the same. You. It starts innocently enough, the search for certainty. You close your eyes and ask, how do I know I exist? Immediately, answers arise. Your awareness of your breath, the memory of what you ate for breakfast, the sound of your own voice echoing in your mind. Each one seems convincing for a moment, but pause and look closer. Where did that evidence come from? It came from within the very system you are trying to validate. The proof is not external, not independent. It's like trying to lift yourself by your own shoelaces or to taste your own tongue. Every test, every sensation, every chain of logic begins and ends inside the mind. This is not a trick, but a deep structure of consciousness itself. No matter how you twist and turn, the circle closes in on itself. The philosopher Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am," using thought as undeniable evidence of the self. But even that, when examined, is only another thought. What if the I is just a story that thought tells itself, a pattern that feels real because it's all you've ever known? The moment you try to step outside that story to check, you're still inside it, using thought to question thought, mind to verify mind. It's the ultimate recursion, a system examining itself with its own tools, forever chasing its own tail. This paradox doesn't just haunt philosophers. It's built into everyday experience. You want to be sure of your memories, but you can only use your memory to check them. You want to know your senses are reliable, but all you have are your senses to test their truth. The evidence is always one step ahead, dissolving into the very mind that seeks it. Even when you doubt your own mind, when you suspect you're dreaming, hallucinating, or caught in a simulation, the doubt itself is still a function of your mind. There's no exit, no objective perch from which to finally, absolutely confirm you are what you feel yourself to be. The disproven proof is not defeat, it's revelation. It shows you that certainty at the deepest level is impossible because you are forever confined to the theater of your own mind. Every proof is a play performed on that same stage, by the same actors, for the same audience. But this isn't nihilism. In fact, it's what makes self-awareness so profound. To see the limits of proof is to see the wonder of consciousness itself. You are the question and the answer, the seeker and the sought. Sometimes people find this realization frightening, a kind of existential vertigo, the sense that if you can't prove your own mind exists, then maybe nothing is real. But you can also see it as freedom. If every proof returns to the mind, then your experience is the starting point for meaning, for beauty, for presence. You do not need outside validation to exist. The mere act of questioning, of seeking, of feeling and thinking is its own strange, unprovable proof. Next time you find yourself searching for certainty, asking, how do I know I'm real? Pause and notice the mind at work. See the circularity, the recursion, the inescapable loop. Notice that all your proofs are reflections in the same pool, ripples caused by your own questions. And then perhaps let the question fall silent for a moment. Sit with the impossibility, with the mystery that no logic can resolve. There, in the quiet after all proof collapses, you may glimpse the odd, raw miracle of simply being, unprovable, and yet undeniably alive. The illusion of independence. You sit alone, a thought flickers through your mind, and it feels spontaneous, pure, self-generated, yours alone. This is the illusion of independence, the seductive belief that your thoughts are unchained, original, rising out of nowhere like sparks in a void. But look closer. Trace the thought backward, and you'll see invisible roots. A word you heard earlier, a song in the background, the shape of a room, a memory triggered by the slant of sunlight, or a phrase in a conversation from weeks ago. Thoughts never truly stand alone. They lean on everything that came before, woven from the world around you and the language inside you. Language itself is the hidden scaffold. Even now, as you listen, your mind arranges meaning using structures built by others. Grammar, metaphors, cultural references, symbols inherited from people you'll never meet. You can't think tree or love or freedom without calling on shared meanings passed down for generations. Every thought borrows a shape from what already exists, forming within limits set by the words available to you. Try to imagine something for which your language has no words, and you'll find your mind circling a blankness it cannot penetrate. Context, too, is the silent author. The same idea can feel urgent or pointless depending on what's happening around you. A worry about the future lands differently when you're safe at home than when you're facing uncertainty at work or in a crowded street. Your emotional state, the weather, the news you scrolled this morning, even the posture of your body, all quietly nudge your thoughts along their hidden rails. What seems like a sudden insight is often the final drop of water in a cup filled by 1,000 unnoticed drips. Prior thoughts are the soil from which new ones sprout. The mind is not a blank page, it's a living field, crowded with old stories, opinions, memories, doubts. Each new thought is shaped by the residue of what came before, the argument you had yesterday, the book you read as a child, the lessons you learned, and the ones you never unlearned. Even rebellion, thinking differently, breaking a pattern, is only possible because of the very context you're resisting. You cannot outpace your history. You can only dance with it, remixing its influences in new and sometimes surprising ways. This illusion of independence is comforting. It lets you feel unique, sovereign, self-made. And in a sense, you are. No one else arranges these influences in quite the same pattern. No one else makes meaning out of precisely your mix of context, memory, and language. But the tapestry is collaborative. Every original idea is a remix, a new fold in a vast fabric woven by countless hands. The mind, for all its brilliance, is not a solitary inventor, but a gatherer, a weaver, a translator of the world's endless input. Seeing through this illusion is not meant to diminish you. Instead, it's an invitation to humility and wonder. You are not less real because your thoughts are shaped by context and history. You are more connected. Your very mind is a living record of everything you've seen, heard, and felt, and of the vast human conversation echoing through time. When you pause to notice the threads, language, experience, prior thoughts, the ever-present influence of others, you may find not isolation, but a strange intimacy with the world. Your thoughts are not alone, and neither are you. So the next time a thought appears, sudden and bright, let yourself marvel at its origins. See the roots tangled deep in your memory, the branches reaching out to language and context, the leaves trembling with the influences of 1,000 unseen winds. The illusion of independence is just that, an illusion. But within it, a deeper truth. That every thought is both a gift and a collaboration, a sign that you are part of something infinitely larger than yourself, even in the privacy of your own mind. The self-validating feeling. There's a certain kind of feeling that's more than emotion. It insists. It arrives with weight, warmth, a subtle thrill. You say something, make a judgment, hold a belief, and then comes the flush of inner confirmation. A surge that tells you, yes, that's right, that's true. But what if that feeling isn't proof? What if it's not signaling accuracy, but reinforcing attachment? This is the self-validating feeling, the quiet, convincing sense that you're right simply because it feels like you are. And here's the twist. The feeling wasn't summoned by truth. It was designed by your brain for your benefit to keep your beliefs intact. It's psychological momentum. You've carried an idea for so long that your mind builds reinforcement scaffolding around it. And each time you return to it, the scaffolding holds you up. Not because it's solid, but because you've stopped noticing what it's made of. Your body reacts as if something profound has been confirmed, a wave of alignment. But beneath that wave may be no evidence at all, just history, just familiarity, just a chemical loop repeating itself. This is how belief becomes felt truth, not logical, felt. It's why people cling to ideas long after they've been disproven, why apologies are delayed by stubborn certainty, why conspiracy theories feel so convincing. Because the emotional response isn't reacting to facts, it's reacting to internal congruence. It feels true because it fits the map already drawn inside you. The mind loves harmony. When a thought aligns with your worldview, it rewards you. A little dopamine, a bit of pride, a sense of coherence. And suddenly, the belief gets locked in. Not because it's been tested, but because it feels right to you. And then, you trust the feeling. That's the danger. You say, I just know, and you mean it. You say, I can feel it in my gut, and maybe you can. But gut feelings evolved for survival, not for accuracy in abstract thought. Your body can give you brilliant signals, but it can also echo old fears, inherited stories, trauma, bias, and wishful thinking. So you must ask, is this feeling a compass or a loop? Because once a belief becomes self-validating, it becomes self-sealing. Any challenge to it feels like a threat. You say, I've thought about this a lot, but what you've really done is felt it a lot. You've replayed it so often that it's etched into your nervous system. You're not analyzing, you're reliving. And the more you feel it, the more you believe it. The more you believe it, the more you feel it. That's the loop. A closed system. No new data enters, just reinforcement. It can happen with personal narratives too. I'm not good enough. They always leave. I'm meant to be alone. You say these things in your mind and they hurt. But the pain itself becomes familiar. And strangely, that familiarity starts to feel like truth. Because if it weren't true, why would I feel it so deeply? That's the trap. Pain isn't proof. Intensity isn't evidence. The feeling is real, but the meaning you attach to it may not be. Your brain builds emotional scaffolding not to verify the world, but to preserve your mental consistency. It favors coherence over accuracy. It wants the story to make sense, even if the story is wrong. And when someone challenges that story, you recoil. Not because you've been insulted, but because your inner structure has been questioned. And structure is comfort. But if comfort comes from illusion, what does it cost? It costs clarity. It costs growth. It costs the ability to admit, I might feel right, and still be wrong. That admission doesn't weaken you. It strengthens your mind. Because true wisdom isn't the ability to feel confident. It's the ability to pause when confidence comes too quickly. It's the courage to ask, where did this feeling come from? What is it trying to protect? Sometimes the feeling is protecting your pride, sometimes your pain, sometimes your identity, and sometimes just your routine. But once you see it, not as a verdict, but as a signal, you can choose whether to follow it or to question it. The self-validating feeling isn't evil, it's natural. It's your brain trying to help. But help can hurt when it prevents you from seeing clearly. And clarity only comes when you allow space between what you feel and what is. So, next time you feel completely certain, pause, breathe. Ask, is this conviction or conditioning? Insight or inertia? Because even a wrong belief, if felt deeply enough, will masquerade as truth. And sometimes, the real breakthrough isn't in finding a new answer. It's in doubting the feeling that told you you already had one. The originless concept. Every so often, a thought appears in your mind, sudden and inexplicable. A word, an image, an idea. A strange feeling as if conjured from nowhere. You pause, trying to trace its path, to find the source. Was it something you saw? A line you heard in passing? A ripple from a distant memory? Or is this thought truly new? Truly yours? A spontaneous eruption in the dark? This is the mystery of the originless concept. A fleeting awareness that not everything in your mind has a clear genealogy, that the boundaries between self, culture, memory, and chance are far blurrier than you might believe. We spend our days believing our thoughts are ours. We claim them, defend them, define ourselves by them. Yet, how often have you stopped to wonder where they really come from? You're walking, distracted, and suddenly a fragment of song emerges, a tune you haven't heard in years. You're in the shower, and a solution to a problem floats up, complete and ready as if handed to you by someone else. You wake from a dream with an image in your head so vivid, so unexpected, it feels like a gift or a riddle. What was the origin? Memory? Culture? Or something deeper and stranger? Culture weaves itself into you from birth. Every word you speak, every image you see, every custom and story is a seed planted by others. The thoughts that rise in your mind may be echoes of a parent's advice, a teacher's lesson, a film you saw long ago, a rumor circulating in the collective air. You are a tapestry of influences, each thread colored by time and circumstance, history and language. Even your most private thoughts are often borrowed, repurposed, retold. The ideas you call your own may have begun centuries ago in someone else's longing or fear. Yet, memory is another trickster. Sometimes a thought rises and you cannot place it, as if your mind is playing hide and seek with itself. A smell, a song, a word triggers a chain reaction, summoning fragments of childhood or flashes of forgotten feeling. Memory is not a library, but a live performance. Each recall an improvisation, each idea a blend of old and new, fact and fantasy. The origin is obscured by time, by emotion, by the endless rewriting of your own story. Chance, too, plays its part. Your mind is an engine of randomness, always firing, recombining, testing connections. Ideas collide, merge, mutate in the background, far below the level of conscious awareness. Sometimes, what rises is nothing but noise, a misfire. Other times, it is a spark, a joke, a vision, an answer to a question you weren't even asking. You marvel at the strangeness, at the novelty, and wonder, am I the creator or simply the receiver? Then there are the moments that feel truly spontaneous. The scientist struck by an insight in a dream, the artist seized by an image that seems to arrive from another world, the writer haunted by a line that feels dictated by an unseen hand. Is this creativity, intuition, inspiration? Or is it the unconscious mind assembling what you cannot see? The line between accident and intention, invention and reception, blurs until you no longer know where you end and the world begins. Philosophers have struggled with this riddle for centuries. Are thoughts ever truly original, or are they always echoes, combinations, mutations of what came before? Is there such a thing as pure spontaneity, or is every concept a ghostly blend of past and present, self and other, reason and randomness? To claim a thought as mine is to stand atop a mountain of unseen influence, every peak built from the stones of forgotten moments and inherited dreams. Yet, there is a strange beauty in the originless concept. It humbles you, reminds you that your mind is a crossroads, not a fortress. You are always receiving, transmitting, transforming. Your uniqueness lies not in perfect originality, but in the way you remix, reinterpret, and give new life to what moves through you. The sudden thought is a mystery, yes, but also a sign of your connection to everything. History, culture, chance, and the raw possibility of being. There is also a quiet freedom in this awareness. If not every thought is yours, you need not cling to all of them. You can watch ideas come and go, honoring the strange ones, releasing the unhelpful, trusting that you are more than the sum of your passing notions. The originless concept invites you to be curious, not possessive, to marvel at the mind's wild garden, not fence it in. So the next time a thought appears from nowhere, bright, haunting, or just odd, pause before you try to claim it or discard it. Ask where it might have come from, but also allow for mystery. Let it move through you, shape you, and then let it go. For the mind is not a closed room, but a field open to weather, to seeds, to winds that carry gifts from far away. Perhaps what matters is not always the origin, but what you do with the thought once it arrives. How you let it change you, how you use it to create, to connect, to question and become more than you were. In the end, the originless concept is both a puzzle and a promise, a reminder that you are at once a singular mind and a chorus of histories, a brief, unique spark in the long, mysterious chain of ideas that has no clear beginning and no end. The expectation that creates. It begins so subtly you hardly notice it. A small expectation takes root in your mind. Maybe you're told to watch for a red car on your drive, or that a certain song will play at the cafe, or that your friend seems a bit distant lately. The idea settles quietly, just beneath the surface, and then something strange happens. You start to see what you expect. Every red car leaps out at you. The song seems to play on a loop. Your friend's smallest actions confirm your suspicion. Is this just coincidence, or is there something deeper at play? This is the expectation that creates. The phenomenon where what you anticipate doesn't just color your perception, it sculpts reality itself. The brain, once primed, finds what it expects to find, sometimes with such power that it almost manufactures the very evidence it craves. The mechanism is ancient and deeply embedded in the machinery of your mind. Humans are not passive observers of the world. We are active constructors of experience. At every moment, your senses receive far more information than your conscious mind could ever process. So your brain becomes selective, filtering out the noise and tuning in to whatever you have decided, consciously or unconsciously, to notice. This is why, after you learn a new word, you suddenly see it everywhere, or why a song you never noticed before seems to play at every turn. The phenomenon is called the Baader-Meinhof effect, or frequency illusion. But at its heart, it is about expectation. You expect, and then you see. This goes far beyond trivia. Expectation shapes your experience of the world in profound ways. Imagine you've been told that people from a certain city are unfriendly. The next time you visit, you unconsciously watch for signs of rudeness. A small slight, real or imagined, stands out, reinforcing what you knew all along. Meanwhile, you ignore the smiles, the kindnesses, the moments that might contradict your preconception. Your expectation becomes self-fulfilling, narrowing your attention to match the story you're already telling yourself. It's the same in relationships. If you suspect someone is upset with you, every silence becomes heavy, every glance a confirmation. Your mind scans for proof, filtering the flood of social cues until only those that fit your fear remain. And if you expect someone to like you, you unconsciously behave more warmly, making your own expectation more likely to come true. In this way, your beliefs become the lens through which you experience reality, bending facts and feelings to fit the shape of your anticipation. But this isn't just a psychological trick, it's a survival skill. In the wild, expecting danger primes you to notice rustling in the grass, a flash of movement, the faintest scent of a predator. Your expectation keeps you alive, making you hypervigilant, sharpening your senses. The downside is that the same mechanism can trap you, causing you to see threats where there are none, or opportunities where you're only seeing what you want to see. The mind, so eager to confirm its own story, can blind itself to everything else. Marketing, politics, even magic tricks exploit this principle. Advertisers create expectations about a product, and suddenly it seems to work just as promised. Politicians frame debates in ways that lead you to see the evidence their way. Magicians misdirect your attention so that you see what they want you to see, not what actually happened. Everywhere you turn, expectation is quietly writing the script of your reality. There is a liberating insight here, but also a warning. The expectation that creates means you have more power than you think, to shape your own experience, but also to delude yourself. If you expect to fail, your mind notices every small setback, reinforcing your story of inadequacy. If you expect to grow, you notice progress, even if it's small. Your mindset literally tunes the world. Change your expectation, and what you see, feel, and believe can change too. Science has mapped this in the laboratory. In studies where participants are told to expect a certain outcome, their brains respond as if it's already happening, even when it's not. Placebo effects, for example, are rooted in expectation. A sugar pill can relieve pain or even heal, not because of its chemical content, but because the patient expects relief. Their brain, acting on this belief, releases its own painkillers, blurring the line between expectation and reality. This power can be harnessed for good. Athletes visualize their performance, priming their bodies to deliver when the time comes. Therapists teach clients to expect progress, opening doors that had seemed closed. Teachers who expect greatness from their students often find that greatness blooms, not from nowhere, but from the attentive focus and encouragement their expectations bring. The mind, when aligned with hope, becomes a subtle engine for change, yet the shadow remains. Expectation can also limit, imprison, distort. If you expect people to be untrustworthy, you find betrayal everywhere. If you expect yourself to always be anxious, you notice every heartbeat, every tremor of nerves, feeding your own fear. You live inside the world your expectations build, sometimes never realizing it is a construction, not a discovery. Awareness is the antidote. Recognize that every expectation is a lens, not a law. Notice when you're looking for evidence to confirm your story. Ask yourself, what am I missing? What could I see if I expected something different? The greatest growth comes when you step outside the narrow boundaries of your current expectations and allow the world to surprise you, to contradict you, to reveal something you never thought to look for. So, next time you find yourself seeing exactly what you expected, pause. Consider that you may have played a part in its appearance. Your mind is powerful, not just at recording the world, but at creating the version of the world you live inside. Use that power wisely. Expect good, and you may notice more of it. Expect challenge, and you may be ready for it. But always leave room for the unexpected, for the evidence that doesn't fit, for the possibility that reality is bigger, stranger, and more beautiful than your expectations ever allowed. Because in the end, the expectation that creates is both a gift and a responsibility, a reminder that you are not just a passenger in your own story, but also, in ways large and small, its quiet architect. The language trap. Language is the magic trick you perform on yourself every day, an ancient spell you learned so young you forgot it was a trick at all. You open your mouth, or your mind, and out tumble words, orderly, familiar, shaped into sentences as if they could capture reality itself. They make your thoughts feel neat, complete, easy to hand over to another. But beneath that surface of fluency, the truth is stranger and more treacherous. Words are only shadows, echoes, mere symbols stretched across a world that cannot be contained. This is the language trap. The illusion that because you have words for a thing, you have understood it. That what can be spoken or written is simple, bounded, and true. Pause and notice. When you label an emotion as sadness, the word feels solid, like a container for your feeling. But is your sadness the same as mine? Does sadness capture the sharp ache of a breakup, the dull throb of loss, the existential weight of a gray morning? Each person's experience swirls with nuance, but the word flattens it, makes it manageable, even as it hides a universe of difference. The moment you give something a name, you begin to forget everything the name cannot hold. Language allows you to believe your thoughts are clear, as if every sentence were a window onto reality. But words are not windows, they are walls, boundaries that keep complexity at bay. But the word love is an umbrella shading thousands of contradictory feelings. Longing, devotion, desire, fear, even resentment. Each is tangled in memory, culture, mood, and history. But language makes it sound simple. In this way, language fools you, soothing the discomfort of ambiguity, giving you the illusion of certainty where none exists. Think of any complex idea. Justice, freedom, self, time. Each one seems obvious when spoken. But the moment you look closer, the word dissolves. Justice for whom? Freedom from what? What is a self or time, if not the mind's attempt to wrangle the ungraspable into speech? The words are maps, never the territory. Yet the more you use them, the more you mistake the map for the world itself. This trap goes even deeper. The language you inherit, your native tongue, your dialect, your cultural metaphors, shapes the way you see. Some languages have dozens of words for snow, or for types of love, or for the movement of wind. Others have none. What you can say, you can see. What you cannot say, you may never notice at all. So language is not just a tool, it is a cage, a filter, a set of blinders that narrows the horizon of what you can imagine. Yet, for all its failures, language is also a miracle. Without it, you could not share a story, ask for help, or dream together. Words let you reach across the gulf between minds, to hint at what it's like to be you. But if you take them too seriously, if you trust them as literal truths, you lose sight of the depth and wildness of experience that words can never capture. Examples are everywhere. Arguments about politics, relationships, identity, they often boil down to a battle over words, each side certain their definition is correct, each unable to see the ocean of meaning hiding beneath the surface. Even your own thoughts are tangled in this net. You think you know yourself because you can narrate your life in language, but your feelings, urges, and memories are richer, deeper, more mysterious than any story you can tell. The language trap is not an argument against words. It is an invitation to humility, to remember that every sentence is a sketch, every description a guess, every conversation a negotiation with reality's unknowable depths. Next time you're tempted to believe that naming something is the same as understanding it, pause and look behind the word. Ask yourself, what am I not seeing, not saying, not able to say? Notice how quickly language simplifies the infinite. Notice, too, the awe and terror of what remains unsaid. If you can hold this awareness, you can use language more playfully, more gently. Knowing that your words are only tools, not truths, you can listen for what's missing, for what cannot be named. In that space, beyond the limits of speech, you may find the real heart of experience, wild, tangled, unspoken, and forever beyond capture. The doubt loop. It begins as a flicker, an ordinary, seemingly reasonable doubt. Maybe you question your memory of a conversation, the truth of a news story, the sincerity in someone's voice, or even your own motives. At first, the doubt feels healthy, even empowering. You're not gullible, not easily swayed, you tell yourself. Doubt is a sign of intelligence, of self-awareness. It's the tool that keeps you from leaping blindly into error. But then, just beneath the surface, another layer emerges. Doubt about the doubt itself. Was your skepticism justified? Are you being too suspicious? Can you trust your own doubts, or are they just another distortion? This is the doubt loop. A peculiar psychological whirlpool where each attempt at certainty spirals back into more uncertainty. Doubt, which once promised clarity, becomes the very thing clouding your mind. You find yourself circling the same question. Is my doubt reasonable, or is it paranoia? Every answer births another round of skepticism. If you question a belief, you might feel wise, but if you question your questioning, the belief starts to look sturdy again. If only because you've exhausted your ability to challenge it. Doubt flips over and reveals belief, which then invites more doubt, spinning on and on with no exit. The loop is relentless because doubt is recursive by nature. It doesn't just interrogate facts, it interrogates its own premises. The mind, desperate for certainty, turns the spotlight inward, hoping to find solid ground. But each level of analysis only uncovers another seam of uncertainty, another what if. Am I sure I locked the door? I think so, but maybe I just remember thinking about locking it. But what if that memory is itself a construction, a false reassurance? The more you question, the more elusive the answer becomes. This endless cycle can paralyze. You might start with a small doubt and end up unable to trust your own judgment at all. In some cases, the loop spirals into anxiety, obsessive rumination, or even philosophical despair. How do you know what's real if every belief is open to challenge, and every challenge can itself be doubted? Some try to break the loop by choosing certainty, clinging to a belief just to stop the spinning. Others dive deeper, chasing a perfect skepticism that never arrives. Yet, here's the paradox. The very act of doubting the doubt exposes the limits of endless skepticism. If you doubt your doubts enough, you often fall right back into belief. Sometimes not because the belief is truer, but because you simply can't sustain infinite questioning. The mind, like a pendulum, swings between suspicion and trust, needing both to function. Pure doubt with no resting place collapses under its own weight. Pure belief without doubt risks delusion. Philosophers have wrestled with this loop for centuries. Descartes, searching for absolute certainty, doubted everything he could until he landed on the famous, I think, therefore I am. But even that, he realized, was a kind of leap, a belief chosen so the doubt could finally rest. Everyday life, too, demands that we move in and out of the loop. We doubt when it's useful, then let go and act, trusting our senses, our memories, our reasoning, not because they're infallible, but because to do otherwise would freeze us in place. So the next time you catch yourself circling in a doubt loop, recognize the pattern for what it is. Not a sign of failure, but the engine of self-awareness running a bit too hot. You're not broken for questioning your thoughts, nor for wanting relief from questioning. The loop itself is part of being conscious, a built-in feature of a mind that cares about truth, but also craves stability. The art is not in escaping the loop forever, but in learning when to doubt and when to rest. Sometimes, the wisest move is to accept that certainty and doubt are forever partners in the dance of the mind, each giving shape to the other, neither ever fully winning, both necessary for a life well examined. The self-contradicting claim, you hear someone say it, you've said it yourself, I know nothing. It sounds humble, philosophical, as if surrendering knowledge is a sign of wisdom. But something strange happens the moment you speak it aloud. You realize claiming to know nothing is still a claim, a certainty, a position. You've made a statement you believe to be true, so even ignorance becomes a form of knowing. This is the self-contradicting claim, when even the denial of knowledge confirms that something is still being held as fact. It's not a trick of language, it's a mirror of mind. Because to say, I know nothing, requires that you know at least one thing, that you know nothing. And so, the sentence eats itself. The moment it is born, it begins to collapse. And in that collapse, it reveals something deep, that there is no such thing as complete ignorance that can speak. To speak is to choose. To choose is to believe. And to believe is to know something, even if it's just the knowing that you don't. This isn't just a philosophical riddle. It's an emotional pattern. It shows up when you're lost, overwhelmed, disillusioned. You throw your hands up and say, I don't know anything anymore. But in that moment, you do know something, that your confusion is real, that your former clarity feels distant, that your current state is uncertain, all of which are forms of knowledge. The contradiction doesn't cancel itself. It deepens the question. This paradox is ancient. It sits at the heart of Socratic wisdom. I know that I know nothing. But even that isn't truly nothing. It's a foundation, a perspective, a way of navigating the world with humility. But humility isn't blankness, it's recognition of limits. And limits require that you've explored something. To say, I know nothing, is often a shortcut, for what I thought I knew can no longer be trusted. And that's honest, that's real. But don't mistake the collapse of one belief for the absence of all belief. Something always remains, even if it's just the awareness that your map needs redrawing. What's more dangerous than false knowledge is performative ignorance, pretending to hold no position while quietly defending one, hiding behind I don't know as a way to avoid conflict or responsibility or discomfort. But that too is a stance, a tactic, an expression of what you believe is safest. You are never truly without belief. You are never truly blank. Your silence speaks, your doubt declares, your confusion points. Even your hesitation is data. And this matters, because in a world obsessed with being right, the temptation to reject all knowledge can feel refreshing, safe. But if you swing too far, you begin to equate uncertainty with superiority. You start to see those who believe things as naive, while those who admit nothing appear enlightened. But withholding belief isn't always wisdom. Sometimes it's just fear with good posture. You say, I don't know what's real anymore, and that may be true. But you still trust the ground under your feet. You still believe in breath, in pain, in the memory of who you were 5 minutes ago. Even in doubt, you choose. Even in silence, you lean somewhere. So the question becomes, what do I actually know? And what am I pretending not to? Sometimes it's easier to say, I know nothing, than to admit, I know something, but I'm scared of what it means. Or, I know, but I wish I didn't. Or, I know, but I can't prove it to you. Because real knowing isn't always logical. It isn't always verbal. Sometimes you know in your bones. Sometimes you know in the way your body reacts before your mind catches up. Sometimes you know through pattern, through ache, through an intuition that has never led you wrong. The paradox isn't a trap. It's a threshold. It forces you to admit that knowing and not knowing aren't opposites. They're coiled together. Every insight contains a blind spot. Every blind spot hides a new perspective. To know is to risk error, but to never know is to avoid the responsibility of living. You don't need to claim total ignorance to stay humble. You can simply say, what I know is partial, it might change. But for now, it's real to me. Because acknowledging what you know, without pretending it's everything, is not arrogance, it's presence. You don't have to be loud about it. You don't have to be sure in a way that silences others. But you can say, this is what I see. This is what I've learned. This is what I hold, for now. That's the real paradox. to speak with softness and still speak it all, to know you're fallible and still move forward, to hold a belief not like a sword, but like a lantern, knowing it might flicker, but also knowing it lights the path ahead, even if the path is uncertain, even if the light came from a question you thought was empty. The awareness gap. There is a silence beneath every thought, a current running beneath the surface of your mind, a presence so subtle you barely notice it, and yet it is always there. It is awareness itself, the quiet field in which every experience, sensation, and memory arises. You live your life moving through this field, acting, feeling, wanting, fearing, believing yourself to be awake and present. But the moment you try to catch awareness itself, try to look directly at what it is to be aware, you find it slipping through your grasp. As soon as you notice your awareness, the act of noticing changes it. This is the awareness gap, the strange, unreachable distance between pure being and the self that observes it, a gap that no amount of effort can ever close. Try it now. Turn your attention inward, toward the sense of I am. You might feel a flicker of presence, a sense of aliveness that precedes any thought, but as soon as you name it, label it, or even just notice it, something shifts. The presence you hope to see directly now stands behind a veil, the veil of self-consciousness, of language, of observation itself. The purity is lost, replaced by an echo, a reflection, a filtered version of what you hope to find. This is not just a trick of language or a quirk of the mind. It is a fundamental paradox of consciousness. Awareness, by its nature, is always one step ahead of what can be observed. When you focus on the contents of your mind, your thoughts, feelings, plans, and regrets, you feel separate from them, like a witness or a watcher. But the watcher can never see itself directly. As soon as it turns its gaze upon itself, it becomes something new, a loop of attention, a mirror looking at a mirror, forever chasing its own tail. Philosophers and mystics have pointed to this mystery for centuries. In meditation, you may try to rest in pure awareness, to be the silent witness of all that arises. And sometimes you get close, a taste of stillness, a glimpse of the ground of being. But the moment you notice the experience, the moment you say, "Ah, I am aware," the spell is broken. Awareness becomes an object, a thought, a memory. The gap returns. You may try to bridge the gap by being ever more present, ever more attentive, but the paradox remains. The act of noticing is always a movement away from pure presence, turning it into something noticed. No longer just being, but being aware of being. It is like trying to see your own eye without a mirror, or to taste your own tongue. The experience can be approached, but never possessed. In everyday life, the awareness gap is subtle, but always there. You lose yourself in music, in work, in conversation, and for a moment you are simply living. No watcher, no commentator, just pure experience. But then, as soon as you realize, I am so present right now, the moment shifts. The internal narrator steps in, and you are once again on the outside, watching yourself live instead of simply living. The moment of pure awareness, unfiltered and untouched, is always a step behind the observer. Science, too, hints at this ungraspable space. Neuroscientists search for the source of consciousness, for the seat of awareness, but the closer they look, the more the answer recedes. Awareness is not a place in the brain, not a single process, but a relationship, a dance between observer and observed, knower and known, always changing, never pinned down. There is a kind of existential humility in this realization. You will never catch yourself in the act of pure awareness. There will always be a gap between the living of your life and the noticing of it, a filter of interpretation, of self-reflection, of subtle distance. But this gap is not a flaw. It is the space in which creativity, curiosity, and self-discovery live. If you could see awareness unfiltered, it would no longer be awareness. It would become an object, something separate from yourself, something lost to the very act of noticing. Maybe the beauty of consciousness lies in this impossibility. You are always both here and elsewhere, both inside and outside, both living and observing. The awareness gap keeps you searching, keeps you moving between presence and reflection, keeps you asking what it means to be alive at all. It is the space where longing is born, where wonder awakens, where the mystery of existence is kept alive. So the next time you notice your awareness and feel it slipping away, remember, this is not failure, but the very nature of consciousness. The noticing changes the thing noticed. The observer becomes the observed. The loop is unbroken, eternal, and endlessly rich. You can rest in the awareness gap, not as a problem to be solved, but as a doorway to humility, to awe, to the ongoing miracle of simply being. The memory fabrication loop. Memory is often trusted as the anchor of identity, the invisible thread that ties you to who you were, the vault that stores your life's defining moments, the mirror in which you seek evidence of your past. But what if that mirror is warped? What if the very act of remembering changes the memory itself, transforming recollection into an act of creative fiction, repeated so often that you begin to mistake it for fact? This is the memory fabrication loop, a strange, endlessly repeating cycle in which every attempt to recall a memory quietly edits, reshapes, and sometimes even invents, until what you hold most dear is, in ways both subtle and profound, a story of your own making. You might believe that memory is like a video recording, a faithful playback of reality, untouched by the present. But science tells a more haunting tale. Each time you remember an event, your brain must reconstruct it, piecing it together from fragments, emotions, sensory traces, and the beliefs you hold now. The act of remembering is not passive retrieval, but active creation. Like an artist retouching a painting, you add new details, soften old edges, replace blanks with guesses, and infuse it all with the color of your current mood, knowledge, and needs. The next time you remember the event, you're not pulling up the original, you're recalling your last edited version. In this way, memory becomes a palimpsest, written and rewritten, a story rewritten each time it's told. Think of an old friendship, one that ended badly, or with unresolved questions. The first time you remember a critical conversation, it may be blurry, tinged with pain, but full of ambiguity. But over the years, as you replay that memory, the details harden. You become sure about the words exchanged, the look in their eyes, the reasons for everything that happened. But are you remembering, or are you reconstructing, editing the memory to make sense of your loss, to protect yourself, or to justify your choices? The answer is almost always both. This loop is not a flaw, but a function of how the brain works. When you remember, neurons fire in patterns similar to the original experience, but not identical. The brain fills in gaps with plausible details, borrowed from similar experiences or your current understanding. If you've ever argued with someone about the details of a shared event, each of you adamant that your memory is correct, you've felt this in action. Both of you are certain, yet both memories have been rewritten by years of repetition and quiet editing. The memory fabrication loop is most striking when it comes to stories you've told often. The more you recount a childhood tale, the more vivid it becomes in your mind. Yet also, paradoxically, the further it drifts from the messy, ambiguous truth of the original. You may add a joke, exaggerate a fear, soften a disappointment. With each telling, the story solidifies, not because it is more true, but because it is more rehearsed. Eventually, the memory is not of the event, but of the telling itself. You remember remembering. This loop is powerful enough to create memories of things that never happened. Psychological experiments show that people can be led to remember entire events. A lost child in a mall, a car crash, a meeting with a celebrity, through nothing more than suggestion and repetition. The mind, craving coherence, stitches together fragments into a believable narrative. You can come to believe utterly in a fiction of your own creation, defending it with the same passion as any real memory. But even ordinary, everyday memories are caught in this loop. Consider your first day at a new job. The anxiety, the faces, the details of the space. These are sharp at first, but as you retell the story over the years, you simplify, highlight, and embellish. Maybe you add a funny detail, or leave out the awkward silences. Over time, your story becomes a carefully curated highlight reel, shaped as much by your present self as by your past experience. There's a quiet danger in this loop. If you trust memory too much, you may cling to stories that no longer serve you, or judge others based on details that never truly happened. You may misremember wounds, betrayals, or victories, convincing yourself of a narrative that feels real but is partly invented. Memory, in this sense, is a novelist, not a reporter. And yet, there is also beauty here. The memory fabrication loop is part of what makes you human. It allows you to revise your past, to heal, to find new meaning in old pain. You can reinterpret childhood struggles as sources of strength. You can remember losses with gratitude rather than bitterness. In the act of remembering, you are always, in some small way, rewriting yourself, making sense of a life that is always changing. What can you do with this knowledge? First, be humble. Recognize that memory is a living, breathing thing, not a cold storage of facts. Be gentle with yourself and with others when memories don't match or when details shift over time. Second, use the loop consciously. If you must remember, choose to highlight what helps you grow. Let old stories be revised with compassion, not with judgment or blame. And finally, hold your memories lightly. Celebrate them for the meaning they offer, but do not chain yourself to every detail. So the next time you find yourself reaching for an old memory, pause. Notice the urge to reshape it, to polish it for retelling, to make it fit the story you want to believe. Understand that you are not just remembering, you are creating. Every act of recollection is a brushstroke on the canvas of your past. The memory fabrication loop ensures that your identity is always in motion, your story always being written. In this, you are both the author and the reader, living and reliving your own creative fiction, always mistaking the newest draft for the original, always discovering yourself anew. The thought without thinker. A thought arrives, unexpected, like a bird landing on a windowsill. You didn't summon it. You didn't design it. It appears all at once. An image, a memory, a doubt, a fragment of a song, alive in your mind, yet strangely impersonal. For a split second, it's just there, vivid and undeniable. Yet, if you pause to look for the I who created it, you find nothing but empty space. This is the paradox of the thought without thinker, a quiet riddle at the heart of consciousness, a question that dissolves the familiar story of self. We grow up believing in a central author, an inner narrator, the thinker, who invents, controls, and selects each thought, as if the mind is a private workspace and we are the diligent worker inside. But the more closely you watch, the more this story unravels. Thoughts arise and fade without warning. Some are wanted, others unwelcome, and most seem to come from nowhere at all. Where then is the thinker? If you search for the source, the architect, the pilot, the inner executive, you always end up chasing shadows. There's thinking, but never a thinker. There's a show, but no one backstage. This isn't just philosophy. It's the raw, lived experience of anyone who has tried to meditate, to be present, or to quiet the mind. Sit still and listen. The mind is a wild forest, thoughts rustling up from the undergrowth, each with its own shape and story. You can't predict what will show up next. The wish to have only positive thoughts, or only wise thoughts, is as futile as wishing for a river to flow only straight. Thoughts come and go, and their arrival is never truly yours to command. But if there's no thinker, who is experiencing the thought? This is the puzzle that has haunted sages and scientists for centuries. Neuroscience finds no homunculus, no tiny person pulling the levers inside your brain. Instead, the sense of me is itself a bundle of thoughts, memories, self-images, running commentary, arising in the same way as any other idea. When you look for the owner of a thought, you find only more thoughts, each claiming to be mine, but none able to prove it. Examples are everywhere, if you pay attention. You're walking, and suddenly a childhood memory appears, clear as day. You're sitting in silence, and your mind tosses up a line from a song, a worry about the future, a flash of embarrassment from years ago. Did you choose those thoughts? Did you assemble them? Or did they simply arise? Even the thought, I am thinking this thought, is itself just another thought, showing up unbidden without a clear source. The illusion of the thinker is sticky. It feels as if there must be someone having the thought, or else the thought wouldn't exist. But the reality is more subtle. Thoughts don't need an owner to appear. They arise out of the vast, tangled processes of the brain, memories mixing, emotions flaring, sensory data colliding, cultural echoes repeating. Consciousness is the open space in which these thoughts appear, but that space itself is empty, ownerless, boundless. The me who claims authorship is just another thought, popping up like all the rest. There's both terror and liberation here. It can be unsettling to realize you're not in control, that there is no master behind the mental curtain, but there's a kind of peace too. If thoughts have no thinker, you don't have to feel guilty or proud for what arises. You can watch the parade without getting lost in it. You can learn to see thoughts as clouds drifting across the sky, impermanent, uncontrollable, not truly yours. And in that awareness, a deeper clarity appears. You are not the thinker, but the space in which thinking happens. So, next time a thought bursts into your mind, pause. Don't rush to claim it or push it away. Ask softly, who is thinking this thought? Wait for the answer. You'll find only silence, a blank, a mystery. And in that mystery is the deepest freedom of all, the freedom to rest in awareness, untouched by the endless procession of thoughts that rise and fall, ownerless like echoes in an empty room. The observation dependency. Imagine a thought flickering in the darkness, an impulse, a fragment, a possibility that hovers at the edge of your awareness. Until you notice it, until you give it your conscious attention, it's as if it doesn't truly exist. This is the strange paradox of the observation dependency. A thought, unobserved, remains in limbo, potential, but not real. Only when you become aware, when you turn the light of attention onto that flicker, does it snap into existence, taking form, color, meaning. In this way, consciousness does not simply receive thoughts, it calls them into being, just as observation in quantum physics collapses a cloud of possibilities into a single reality. Throughout your day, thousands of thoughts pass through the vastness of your mind. Most slip by unnoticed, never surfacing into conscious awareness. They are background noise, like the hum of a distant city, always present, but never acknowledged. The few that you do notice become real, shape your choices, and leave traces in memory. But what about the ones you don't? Did they exist at all? Or were they just ghostly patterns in the brain? Potential meanings waiting for a witness? The truth is, awareness acts as a kind of spotlight, and whatever stands in its beam is brought into being. When you observe a thought, you give it weight, reality, even a kind of story. It begins to interact with your beliefs, your emotions, your actions. It can make you smile, flinch, or pause. But until that moment, it's as if the thought was neither present nor absent, a Schrödinger's cat of the mind, both alive and not until observed. This dependency is not just poetic. It's at the heart of how consciousness works. You cannot act on a thought you don't notice. You cannot remember a feeling that never entered the light of attention. Unobserved, the contents of your mind remain in the shadows, like unopened letters gathering dust. Attention is the key that unlocks them, turning possibility into experience. The implications are profound. Every day you live surrounded by possibilities. Ideas you could have noticed, feelings that could have surfaced, insights just beyond the threshold. The reality you experience is only a tiny island in the ocean of what could be. This is not failure. It is the price of having a limited spotlight. What you see becomes your world, and what remains unobserved waits quietly, perhaps forever unformed. Think about the moments when a sudden idea appears fully formed, as if from nowhere. Maybe it was always lurking in the background, needing only your attention to snap into focus. Or consider times when you realize, after the fact, that you missed something crucial, an unspoken emotion, an unrecognized motive. Only when you look back, with the benefit of hindsight, does the thought finally materialize, as if rewinding the tape allowed you to observe what was there all along. This dependency on observation is both empowering and humbling. It means that the act of paying attention is creative, not passive. Your awareness is not just a window on reality. It is an engine that makes reality happen, one thought at a time. But it also means that so much of life is shaped by what you never see, what you never know you missed. Quantum physicists speak of collapse, the idea that, until observed, a particle exists in a cloud of probabilities, only taking a definite state when measured. The mind works in a similar way. Possibilities swirl, only becoming actual when illuminated by awareness. Your reality is built moment by moment, choice by choice, observation by observation. So, the next time a thought catches your attention, realize what you've just done. You have, in a small but profound way, called a new piece of reality into being. The act of observation is not just noticing. It is the creation of meaning, the collapse of possibility into existence. And beyond that, in the darkness, infinite thoughts still wait, each with the potential to shape your world, if only you look their way. The self-reinforcing narrative. You tell your story to others, to yourself, sometimes out loud, sometimes in silence. You repeat the lines, "This is who I am. This is what happened to me. This is how I work. This is why I can't." And the more you say it, the more it solidifies. Not because it's objectively true, but because it feels true, familiar, safe. This is the self-reinforcing narrative, the quiet loop where your repeated version of yourself becomes the only one you're allowed to live. At first, it's just language. Then it becomes belief. Then it becomes identity. The story gains gravity with every retelling. And eventually, you can't tell if you're recalling your life or rewriting it in the same pattern every time. A loop, a script. You repeat it until it becomes muscle memory. And memory, repeated often enough, becomes truth. Even when it's only a truth, not the truth. This is how we build emotional cages out of facts we never re-examined. You say, "I've always been anxious," or "I'm just not someone who takes risks," or "People always leave me." And maybe those things felt true once, but repetition fossilized them, locked them in place. And now, even when evidence appears to the contrary, you don't trust it, because it doesn't match the narrative you've been living. The story defends itself. You don't just see the world through that lens. You edit it, filter it, twist new moments into old meanings. A compliment becomes suspicious. A success feels accidental. You don't experience things as they are. You experience them as confirmations of what you already believe about yourself. This is how identity calcifies, not because your life is fixed, but because your story is. And the scariest part? The more you repeat it, the more others repeat it back to you. People start to expect the version of you you've projected, and so you perform it, out of habit or pressure, or because you don't know how not to. You become an actor trapped in a role you wrote yourself. This isn't about lying. You're not fabricating. You're narrowing. You're picking which facts to amplify and which to ignore. That time you failed becomes the core of your story. That time you won gets left out because it didn't fit the arc. And so, your life becomes a highlight reel of limitation. You build an emotional map and then mistake it for the territory. But here's what's dangerous. The longer you live inside a self-reinforcing narrative, the more alternatives become invisible. Not untrue, just unreadable. The road not taken fades. The other version of you, the one who risked or left or tried again, becomes a stranger. You say, "That's not me." But maybe it was. Maybe it still is. The problem isn't that stories exist. We need stories. They give structure. They help us make sense of chaos. But stories are meant to evolve. And if you're telling the same one year after year, word for word, it's no longer clarity. It's captivity. So how do you break the loop? You start with one question. When did I first start telling this story? Track it back. Was it after a betrayal, a loss, a failure that made sense of pain? Find the root, and then ask, what was true then that may not be true now? You don't erase the story. You widen it. You make space for chapters that were skipped, for strengths you downplayed, for versions of you that weren't convenient for the narrative. You stop saying, "This is who I am," and start asking, "What am I still becoming?" Because the self is not a statue. It's a story still being edited. And repetition doesn't make a story more accurate, only more comfortable. So, get uncomfortable. Catch yourself when the same sentence rises. Pause before you tell it again. Ask, is this still true or just familiar? And then listen for the silence underneath it. In that silence lives the unwritten, the version of you that doesn't need validation through pain. That doesn't need to be consistent with who you were last year. That doesn't need to carry forward a wound just because it once helped you explain the world. You are allowed to stop mid-sentence. You are allowed to tell a new story. Not because the old one was a lie, but because it was incomplete. And completion doesn't come from perfect endings. It comes from having the courage to turn the page before anyone tells you it's time. The knowledge that destroys. Knowledge is often celebrated as a builder, a force that lifts you up, brick by brick, toward clarity, power, and mastery. You're taught to believe that every new idea adds another floor to the tower of understanding, making you taller, wiser, more secure in the world. But sometimes, the very opposite is true. Sometimes, knowledge destroys. You learn something new, and it doesn't make you stronger. It tears away a certainty you thought would last forever. The ground shakes, the old foundations crack, and you are left not with more, but with less. With an open sky where there once was a roof. With doubt where there once was peace. Think back to the first time you learned something that unmade you. Perhaps it was as a child, discovering that grown-ups are fallible, their authority built on shifting sand. Maybe it was the moment you realized that the story you'd been told, about history, about love, about yourself, wasn't the whole truth. Or maybe it happened later, when you stumbled across a scientific theory, a piece of philosophy, a raw confession, and suddenly the old map you used to navigate your life was obsolete. In those moments, knowledge is a force of undoing, not of construction. It is the wave that erases the lines you drew in the sand. This is the knowledge that destroys. It is the insight that does not add, but subtracts. The fact that cancels what you thought you knew. It does not always feel like growth. Sometimes it feels like loss, like a betrayal, like the slow dissolving of something you held sacred. You are forced to let go, to grieve what you can no longer believe. You wander for a while through the ruins of certainty, wondering what, if anything, will replace it. In this there is a special kind of pain, a loneliness born of knowing too much, or of knowing what cannot be unknown. The mind tries to resist, to cling to the old structure, to patch up the cracks. But the damage is done. The new idea lingers, eating away at the foundations, demanding to be integrated or exiled. Sometimes there is anger. Sometimes relief. Sometimes only silence, a sense of free fall. Yet, this destructive knowledge is also what makes you truly alive. It is the only thing that keeps you honest. To learn, really learn, is to risk losing yourself, to surrender the comfort of answers for the wide, trembling space of unknowing. Growth, in its deepest sense, is not a staircase but a burning away. You are not just the sum of what you've added, you are also defined by what you have released, beliefs, habits, identities, even dreams. Every true education is also an exodus. Philosophers and scientists know this well. The history of thought is a history of destruction. Old theories fall, new evidence arrives, entire worldviews collapse. Each breakthrough leaves behind ruins, certainties abandoned, authorities dethroned, questions multiplying in the rubble. The scientific method is not a monument to certainty, but a cycle of trial, error, and surrender. In this, there is both humility and liberation. On a personal level, this process is no less profound. To encounter an idea that undoes you is to stand at the edge of your own identity, to ask, who am I if not this? What is left when what I believed is no longer true? The temptation is to run, to shut the door, to deny the knowledge its destructive power. But if you stay, if you allow yourself to be changed, even shattered, a different kind of wisdom emerges. You learn to hold your beliefs lightly, to make peace with the provisional, to trust that what is real can withstand the fire of truth. There is no map for this territory, no guarantee that what you build next will be more solid, more lasting. Sometimes, all you have is the willingness to keep learning, to keep letting go, to accept that knowledge is not always additive, but sometimes subtractive, that every certainty is, in the end, a question in waiting. So when the knowledge that destroys comes for you, when a new idea shakes your foundation, when a revelation turns your world upside down, do not turn away. Grieve the loss, yes. Mourn the certainties that must dissolve, but know, too, that this is the beginning, not the end. What is destroyed may clear the way for something deeper, truer, more alive than you could ever have built on old, untested ground. The open sky is frightening, but it is also freedom. Let yourself stand in it. Let knowledge undo you, and see what new self can grow in the space where certainty once lived. The impossible neutrality. There's a longing at the heart of every thinker, every scientist, every philosopher. The longing to see reality as it truly is, unfiltered, unclouded, untouched by bias. We yearn for objectivity, for the impossible neutrality that would let us step outside ourselves, examine our own minds, as a scientist examines a specimen beneath a glass. But as soon as you try, you stumble into a trap. The very act of looking changes what you see. The attempt to be neutral, to stand apart from your thoughts and judge them without coloring or influence, guarantees that objectivity will slip through your fingers. You can't think about your thinking without influencing it. Perspective contaminates every attempt at purity. This is the paradox of impossible neutrality. It's a paradox so subtle that we often don't notice it, even as it shapes every opinion, every memory, every judgment. You want to be fair, so you try to weigh the evidence impartially. But where do you begin? With a question, a suspicion, a memory, an intuition. Even before you look at the facts, your perspective is already shaping what counts as fact, what you're willing to see, and what you dismiss as noise. The world is not a bare stage. It's a drama already half written by your past, your culture, your personality, your hidden desires and fears. Try to imagine true objectivity, a view from nowhere, an intellect stripped of all history, emotion, or context. The mind recoils. Without perspective, there is no meaning, no question, no way to even recognize what matters. Every act of perception is an act of selection, and every act of selection is guided by some framework, however subtle or unconscious. You can no more step outside your own perspective than you can leap from your own shadow. Even the language you use to interrogate your own mind is loaded. When you ask, "Why do I think this?" you have already assumed there is a why, a cause, a logic. The very words you choose to describe your inner landscape shape what you see there. Psychology calls this the observer effect, not just in physics, but in the realm of mind. The moment you notice a thought, you are already changing it, moving it from the background hum of consciousness to the sharp focus of scrutiny. Think of those moments when you try to be self-aware. You catch yourself in a feeling, anger, jealousy, joy, and try to observe it, to just notice without judgment. But the act of noticing brings judgment with it. "I am angry," you say. But then the observer self immediately asks, "Is this justified? Am I overreacting? What will others think?" You split into thinker and watcher, but the watcher is never neutral. It brings its own baggage, doubt, shame, pride, curiosity, and by looking, it transforms what it tries to see. This paradox infects every field that values neutrality. In science, experiments are designed to be objective, repeatable, immune to the biases of the researcher. Yet, the very decision of what to measure, what questions to ask, what constitutes an anomaly, is shaped by the perspective of the observer. In journalism, the ideal of impartiality is cherished, yet every story is filtered through choices. Which facts to include, what language to use, whose voices to amplify. Even the effort to show both sides is a choice, shaped by assumptions about balance and fairness. Memory is not spared either. When you recall an event, you are not recovering a static record, but reconstructing an experience through the lens of your current self. Your mood, your desires, your beliefs, all color the memory. You think you are seeing the past, but you are seeing it now through today's eyes. No memory is neutral because no mind is ever blank. So, what's the cost of impossible neutrality? On the surface, it's humbling. A reminder that your judgments are never final, that every conclusion you draw is provisional, shaped by the context in which you draw it. But the deeper cost is a kind of loneliness. The desire for neutrality is often a desire to escape the messiness of being human, the mess of feeling, longing, hoping, fearing. We want to be gods outside it all, gazing down with clarity. But that place doesn't exist. And yet, this is not an argument for hopeless subjectivity or blind bias. The impossibility of neutrality does not mean that all views are equal, or that there's no point striving for clarity. It means that the best we can do is to become aware of our perspectives, to acknowledge the lenses we look through, to cultivate a kind of honesty about our own partiality. True wisdom lies not in denying your perspective, but in recognizing it, learning its shape, understanding how it colors your thoughts and choices. There is power in this kind of humility. When you admit your vision is never perfectly clear, you become more open to the perspectives of others. You listen not just to defend, but to learn. You question your own certainty. You notice the background assumptions that shape your beliefs. This is not neutrality, but it is a kind of balance, a dynamic, honest engagement with the world that values doubt, curiosity, and the willingness to revise. The impossible neutrality is a reminder that your mind is both a lens and a mirror. You see the world, but you also see yourself seeing the world. Every thought is filtered, every judgment is shaped, every memory is painted anew with each recollection. This is the price and the privilege of being conscious. So the next time you catch yourself longing for perfect objectivity, pause, notice the urge, and then notice the impossibility. Ask yourself, what am I bringing to this moment? What questions am I not asking? How does my own perspective narrow or enrich what I see? In that space, between the longing for neutrality and the reality of subjectivity, lies the potential for real understanding. Not because you have transcended yourself, but because you are finally willing to meet yourself where you are, shadow and all. Impossible neutrality is not a failure. It is an invitation to curiosity, to empathy, to deeper awareness. You cannot think about your thinking without changing it, but you can, by recognizing this truth, learn to think with more humility, more openness, more courage, and in that endless imperfect effort, you just might glimpse the world and yourself with a clarity that only comes from knowing how cloudy the lens has always been. The belief that betrays. There's a peculiar pain that comes not from loss, but from the betrayal of your own certainty. A wound opened not by the outside world, but by the collapse of the beliefs that once felt like shelter. This is the belief that betrays, the secret danger in every conviction you hold close, the silent risk hidden in the things you are most sure about. A belief starts as a refuge, a guide, a promise that the world will make sense if you trust it. For a time, it serves you well, lending meaning, direction, and a sense of control. You lean into it. You build on it. You might even defend it fiercely, certain it is not just useful, but true. But belief is a double-edged sword. The stronger its grip, the deeper its roots, the more devastating the moment of betrayal. Life throws you a contradiction, a failure, a heartbreak, a discovery that refuses to fit the old narrative. Suddenly, what once seemed solid cracks. You realize the ground beneath your certainty was never as stable as you believed. And the cruelest twist? The very confidence that once felt like your greatest strength now turns into evidence that you were wrong to trust at all. The more loyal you were to the belief, the sharper the sting of its collapse. Think of the person who believes in the goodness of a friend, until a single act of cruelty rewrites years of trust. Or the scientist who builds a career on a theory, only to watch new data shatter it overnight. Or the lover who shapes their life around a promise, only to find the foundation was illusion all along. When a belief betrays you, it doesn't just leave you empty. It fills the void with doubt, with anger at your own naivete, with the bitter sense that you should have known better. The certainty that once protected you now accuses you, turning its force inward, cutting deeper than any external loss could. This is why people cling so fiercely to failing beliefs, long after evidence piles up against them. To let go is to admit not just that the world changed, but that you were mistaken to ever trust. It's an existential wound, an attack on your sense of self and the reliability of your own mind. The collapse of a core belief feels like a betrayal, not just by an idea, but by yourself. But there's something important hidden inside this pain. Every belief carries the risk of betrayal because every belief is a bet on a world that is bigger, stranger, and more changeable than your mind can grasp. The feeling of betrayal is not a sign of failure, but a sign that you dared to trust at all. To believe is to risk disappointment, but to refuse belief is to live numb, always guarding against hurt, never giving yourself to anything fully. There is a way through the pain. When a belief betrays you, notice the urge to blame yourself for ever trusting it. Notice how certainty turns into shame, into a voice that says, "You should have known." Instead, see the collapse as part of a deeper process, growth through disillusionment. Wisdom earned not by never being wrong, but by surviving the heartbreak of changing your mind. Every belief that fails is a teacher, stripping away false certainty and forcing you to see the world and yourself more clearly. You can learn to hold beliefs more lightly, with a kind of courageous humility. To trust, but not with desperation. To believe, but to leave room for surprise, contradiction, and mystery. The betrayal of belief is painful, but it's also liberating. A reminder that truth is not a possession, but a process. A journey of letting go, learning, and beginning again. In the ruins of certainty, something new can grow. Not the safety of absolute belief, but the deeper strength of resilience, curiosity, and the courage to face reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. So, next time a belief betrays you, pause before you turn your certainty into self-blame. Let yourself mourn, but also let yourself open. In that exposed, uncertain space, you may find not just the end of an old belief, but the start of a wiser, more open-hearted way of seeing and being alive. The infinite regress of self. You search for yourself in moments of silence. Who am I, really? And find only thoughts. A memory here, a belief there, a flash of desire or fear. You dig deeper, hoping to uncover a solid core, something unchanging beneath the restless tide. But every self you reach for dissolves into more thoughts. Patterns, fragments, echoes of things you've seen and felt. Each thought comes dressed in the voice of a thinker, but when you try to meet this thinker face to face, you discover only more thought, opinions about opinions, memories about memories, a hall of mirrors with no clear source. This is the infinite regress of self. The mind whispers, I am the one thinking. But that I itself is nothing more than a bundle of mental habits, roles, and stories looping in on themselves. Try to hold on to the real you, and your hands close on air. Are you the voice narrating your experience, or the silent listener? The planner of tomorrow, or the witness of now? Each layer, when examined, reveals another. The self that worries about being liked, the self that questions that worry, the self that doubts the questioner. On and on, each you, just another ripple on the surface of thought. If you step back and simply watch, you'll see how quickly the mind creates new identities. The one who wants, the one who regrets, the one who is above it all, the one who is broken. But none of these are permanent. They shift and vanish as quickly as they arose, replaced by the next moment's wave. The sense of being a solid self is built from this cascade, a movie stitched from countless single frames, each flickering for a heartbeat, then gone. It's a realization that can feel unsettling, even vertiginous. We're taught to believe in a central me, the pilot of the ship, the soul behind the eyes. But the closer you look, the more you find only an endless regress. Every thinker is just another thought. Some traditions call this Anatman, no fixed self, while modern neuroscience maps it as an emergent property, a virtual center created by millions of firing neurons. The self feels real because the story never stops being told, and because memory knits together the fragments with a thread of continuity. But if you pause within this infinite regress, something remarkable happens. The compulsion to find yourself loosens. You begin to see the self not as a thing, but as a process, an ongoing play of thoughts, perceptions, reactions, all appearing in awareness, all dissolving back into it. You are not just the actor, but the stage on which all these selves appear and disappear. This realization is not a loss, but a strange liberation. You're free from the burden of defending a rigid identity, free to see yourself as a river rather than a stone. Each thought, each mood, each moment of awareness is part of the flow, none more real than the others, none the final you. Instead of a single fixed self, you find endless possibility, a mind endlessly writing and rewriting the story of who you are. So the next time you search for the self behind your thoughts, notice the loop, how each answer simply points to another question, each me to another me. Let the regress open, not into despair, but into curiosity. The self is not missing. It's everywhere, in every experience, and nowhere in particular. The true mystery is not finding the thinker, but witnessing the miracle of thought itself, always arising, always vanishing, always pointing beyond itself.